Why did you come by taxi? My grandmother asked, her sharp eyes scanning the driveway. What happened to the Audi I gave you for your birthday? Before I could answer, my mother smiled her perfect plastic smile and said that car belongs to her younger sister now. The entire gala fell silent. My grandmother did not look at my mother. Instead, she turned to her attorney and asked one lethal question. Who signed the title of that Audi over to her? My name is Maya. I am 29 years old, and somehow still healing from wounds my family inflicted. As a successful public relations executive, I built my life from the ground up, escaping their toxicity, but maintaining occasional contact to keep the peace. I had no idea that my desire for family harmony would lead to the ultimate betrayal. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to a family who underestimated your worth. The exhaust fumes of Hartsfield-Jackson Airport mixed with the humid Atlanta air as I stood on the curb exhausted and completely drained. I had just survived a grueling 3-week crisis tour for a client in Chicago. My feet ached, my brain was depleted, and all I wanted was to see my husband Jamal. I pulled out my phone and texted him that my flight landed early and asked if he could pick me up. His reply came 2 minutes later. He said he was tied up at the house and told me to get an Uber. I swallowed my disappointment. Jamal was a financial analyst, and he claimed his work from home schedule was demanding, but I knew the actual truth. He was playing video games. I hauled my bags into a rideshare and watched the familiar Atlanta skyline blur past my window. I closed my eyes and mentally prepared to collapse into my own bed. I just wanted a hot shower and a quiet evening with the man I loved. When the Uber pulled into the driveway of our suburban home, I noticed something wrong. I keyed in the code to open the garage door, expecting to see the sleek metallic gleam of my Audi. My grandmother Beatrice had given me that beautiful car for my 28th birthday. It was my pride and joy, a symbol of the success I had fought so hard to achieve when my parents offered me nothing but criticism. The garage was completely empty. Panic spiked in my chest. I left my suitcases on the concrete floor and rushed into the house. The living room was perfectly quiet. Jamal was sprawled across the sectional sofa, a video game controller in his hands, barely glancing up as I burst through the front door. "Where is my car?" I demanded, my voice shaking with a mix of sheer exhaustion and rapidly rising anger right now. Jamal paused his game and let out a long, dramatic sigh. He looked at me as if I was a toddler throwing a tantrum. "Your dad came and picked it up this morning," he said casually, picking up his water glass. "Chloe needed it." I stared at him, unable to process the words. My father Richard had come to my house and taken my luxury vehicle for my younger sister Chloe. Chloe was 24, a recent college graduate who spent more time organizing elite sorority events than working. She was the undisputed golden child of my incredibly toxic family. She was the one my parents showered with affection and money, while demanding I fend for myself. "What do you mean he took it?" I asked, stepping closer to the couch. "That is my car. My name is on it. Grandma Beatrice gave it to me. You just let him drive off with it." Jamal rolled his eyes and sat up, adopting that patronizing tone he always used when he thought I was being unreasonable. "Maya, calm down," he said. "Chloe just started her new internship at that high-profile law firm downtown. She needs a luxury car to pull up to the office. It is about image. You work from home half the time anyway. Why are you being so selfish?" The sheer audacity of his words hit me like a physical blow. My own husband, the man who was supposed to be my partner and protector, was calling me selfish for wanting to keep my own vehicle. He was prioritizing my spoiled sister and my image-obsessed parents over his exhausted wife. I just spent 3 weeks flying across the country, dealing with corporate disasters. I shot back, my voice rising loudly in the perfectly quiet living room. "I am not being selfish. That is my personal property. You had absolutely no right to hand my keys over to anyone without my permission." Jamal stood up, trying to use his height to intimidate me, a tactic I had grown increasingly tired of over our 4 years of marriage. "Your mother called me crying yesterday," Jamal insisted, stepping into my personal space. "Vivian was practically in tears, Maya. She said you lack sisterly love. She said you have all this success and you refuse to share it with your family." I was trying to keep the absolute peace here. I gave them the car to please your parents because you clearly do not care about family harmony. I felt a cold realization wash over me. Jamal was weak. He was so desperate for the approval of my wealthy, status-obsessed parents that he was willing to sacrifice my belongings to buy their favor. My mother Vivian knew exactly how to manipulate him. She knew I would have said no, so she bypassed me entirely and went straight to the weak link in my marriage. You gave away a car that does not belong to you, I said, keeping calm. My voice was dangerously low. I want you to call my father right now and tell him to bring it back. If he does not bring it back by tonight, I am reporting it stolen to the police. Jamal scoffed, running a hand over his face. You would really call the cops on your own father. You are exactly as dramatic as your mother says you are. You are making a huge deal out of nothing. It is just a car, Maya. Chloe will bring it back eventually when she buys her own. Before I could tell him the truth, that the police were absolutely going to be my next call, my cell phone began to ring loudly in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw my mother's contact photo flashing on the screen. The timing was impeccable. I answered the call and put it on speaker so Jamal could hear every word. Maya Vivian said, her tone carrying that familiar authoritative edge. I am calling to remind you about your grandmother's 80th birthday gala tonight. I expect you to arrive at the estate looking presentable. None of those off-the-rack business suits you normally wear to work. The mayor is going to be there, and I will not have you embarrassing us in front of the entire city. I gripped the phone tightly, my knuckles turning white. Where is my car, Mom? There was a brief pause on the line, followed by a dismissive little laugh. Oh, do not start with this, Maya. Jamal was kind enough to lend it to Chloe. Your sister looked absolutely radiant driving it to her internship this morning. Do not make a scene about this tonight. Your father and I have very important investors to entertain at the gala right now, and I will not tolerate your typical jealousy. It is not jealousy, I stated clearly into the receiver. It is theft. It is family. She snapped back, her voice dropping its pleasant facade. Something you have always struggled to understand. You have always been so rigid, so unwilling to help your own flesh and blood. Your sister deserves nice things too. We will see you at 7. Do not be late and do not ruin this night for us. The line went dead. I stood in the middle of my living room staring at the phone in absolute disbelief completely. My family had effectively stolen my property. My husband had handed it to them on a silver platter, and they all expected me to show up at a high society party tonight and smile for the cameras. They expected me to fall in line, to absorb the disrespect, to swallow my anger, just like I had done my entire life. Jamal crossed his arms and offered me a self-satisfied smirk. See, she is right. You are overreacting. Go take a shower, put on a nice dress, and we can ride over to the gala together in my own car. We will have a few drinks and you will forget all about this. I looked at the man I had married. I saw the profound cowardice in his eyes, the absolute lack of loyalty. He thought this was a minor argument that could be smoothed over with a cocktail and a forced smile. He had no idea that a massive shift had just occurred inside me. The years of making myself small to accommodate my parents' enormous egos were officially over. The years of accepting Jamal's spineless behavior were completely done. I picked up my purse and turned toward the front door without another word. Where are you going? Jamal asked, his smug expression finally faltering into confusion. I am going to the gala, I replied without looking back at him. But I am absolutely not riding with you. Do not speak to me tonight. Do not stand near me. And do not pretend we are okay. Maya, come on, he called out, taking a step toward me. You are acting crazy. This is exactly why your family thinks you are so difficult to deal with. I stepped out onto the front porch, the heavy, humid air wrapping around me once more. I looked back at him one last time, feeling nothing but absolute clarity. I am not acting crazy, I said, my voice steady and cold. I am finally seeing things clearly for the first time in my life. I slammed the heavy wooden door in his face, the sound echoing loudly through the quiet suburban neighborhood. I pulled out my phone and ordered another Uber, typing in the address for my grandmother's lavish Buckhead estate. I had no car, my marriage was fracturing before my very eyes, and my parents were preparing to parade my sister around in my stolen vehicle. But they had forgotten one crucial detail about me. I was the one who managed public relations nightmares for a living. I handled crisis situations for multinational corporations. I knew exactly how to dismantle a carefully constructed narrative, and tonight the narrative I was going to utterly destroy was theirs. The truth was going to come out, and there would be nowhere for any of them to hide from me. I stood on the curb, waiting for my ride. The air felt different now. I took a deep breath. My era of silence ended tonight. The drive to Buckhead took 45 minutes of navigating through thick Atlanta traffic. I sat in the back of the basic sedan, watching the city lights transition into the sprawling manicured estates of the city's elite neighborhoods. My mind raced with the sheer audacity of what my husband and parents had orchestrated. They truly believed I would just roll over and accept it. They thought my exhaustion would make me compliant. They were completely wrong. The Uber pulled up to the sweeping circular driveway of a massive stone mansion. This was the venue for my grandmother's 80th birthday gala. The front lawn was illuminated by dramatic uplighting, and a line of luxury vehicles stretched down the street. Valets in crisp white shirts rushed to open the doors of Mercedes sedans, Bentleys, and Range Rovers. When my driver pulled my standard rideshare vehicle up to the red carpet, a few photographers lingering near the entrance actually lowered their cameras. I stepped out of the car, smoothing down the fabric of my tailored emerald green dress. It was not a glittering ball gown, but it commanded respect. I kept my posture completely straight and walked up the grand marble steps. Inside the mansion, the atmosphere was electric, with the vibrant energy of Atlanta's black elite. Women in stunning designer gowns and men in immaculate tuxedos mingled under a massive crystal chandelier. Waiters glided through the crowd carrying silver trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. A live jazz band played smoothly in the background, setting a sophisticated tone for the evening. I handed my coat to the attendant in the grand foyer and took a deep breath. Before I even reached the main ballroom, a familiar shrill laugh cut through the music. I turned my head and spotted my younger sister Chloe standing near a towering floral arrangement. She was surrounded by a circle of her sorority sisters, all of them wearing matching pastel dresses and sipping champagne. Right beside her stood Keisha, Jamal's older sister. Keisha was a prominent socialite and a notorious gossip blogger who thrived on tearing other women down. I watched as Chloe raised her hand deliberately, shaking a sleek black key fob, adorned with the signature 4 rings of an Audi. She was holding court, soaking up the admiration of her friends. My parents just surprised me with it this morning. Chloe bragged, her voice carrying easily over the chatter. They knew I needed something reliable and luxurious for my new law firm internship. They are literally the best parents in the world. Her friends cooed and gasped, congratulating her on the amazing gift. My jaw tightened. The absolute delusion required to stand in a room full of people and claim a stolen car as a hard-earned reward was staggering. I started walking toward them, my heels clicking against the polished marble floor. Keisha spotted me first. Her eyes widened for a fraction of a second before her face twisted into a malicious smirk. She nudged Chloe and pointed her champagne flute in my direction. "Well, look who finally decided to grace us with her presence," Keisha announced, her voice artificially loud to ensure everyone nearby could hear. "Maya, we were just talking about you. I saw you pull up outside. Did your little PR business run out of funds for a private car service?" Arriving at a billionaire gala in a standard Uber is certainly a choice. Chloe turned around, clutching my car keys tightly in her fist. She looked me up and down, taking in my understated dress and my lack of flashy jewelry. "Maya, you made it," Chloe said, her tone dripping with fake sweetness. "We figured you might be too busy working from your home office to celebrate Grandma Beatrice tonight. I am so glad you took a break from your struggling PR girl aesthetic to join us." A few of her friends snickered behind their hands. Keisha stepped closer, eyeing me up and down. "Jamal told me you were exhausted from some work trip," Keisha added, practically purring. "He said you were being incredibly difficult today. You really should be nicer to my brother Maya. He puts up with so much of your drama. And honestly, you should thank your parents for taking that excessive car off your hands. It suits Chloe so much better anyway. You do not even go anywhere important." I looked at Keisha and then at Chloe. 5 years ago, this public mockery would have sent me running to the bathroom in tears. I would have internalized their insults and questioned my own worth. Tonight, their taunts sounded like the desperate buzzing of gnats. I did not raise my voice. I did not flinch. Enjoy the keychain, Chloe. I said, my voice perfectly calm and completely devoid of emotion. Because that is the only part of the vehicle you will be keeping. I did not wait for her response. I walked right past them, leaving Chloe sputtering and Keisha glaring at my back. I entered the main ballroom, navigating through the sea of powerful politicians, real estate moguls, and business executives. I was not looking for my parents. I was looking for the only person in this room who commanded true power. At the far end of the ballroom, situated on a slightly elevated platform, was the VIP table. My grandmother Beatrice sat in a high-backed velvet chair, looking like absolute royalty. She wore a stunning silver gown, her posture impeccable, her sharp eyes tracking everything happening in her room. Even at 80 years old, she missed nothing. Sitting directly to her right was Attorney Sterling. He was her longtime legal counsel, a ruthless 60-year-old man who handled her massive real estate empire with an iron fist. He wore a sharp black suit and sat with his hands resting quietly on the table. My parents. Richard and Vivian were hovering near the VIP table, aggressively networking with a group of local city council members. My father looked desperate, laughing too loud at jokes that were not funny. My mother was nodding vigorously, her eyes constantly scanning the room to ensure everyone was watching them associate with the powerful elites. The moment Vivian spotted me walking toward the VIP table, her fake smile vanished. Real panic flashed across her face. She excused herself from the council members and practically sprinted across the ballroom to intercept me. She grabbed my arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging painfully into my skin. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, dragging me slightly to the side. "I told Jamal to keep you at home if you were going to be difficult. Do not you dare ruin this night for us, Maya. Your father is about to secure a massive partnership, and we need everything to look perfect." "Take your hand off me, Mom," I replied, staring down at her gripping fingers until she slowly let go. "I am here to wish my grandmother a happy birthday. If that ruins your night, that sounds like a personal problem." I stepped around her and approached the VIP table. Attorney Sterling gave me a brief, respectful nod. Grandma Beatrice turned her head. Her face softened slightly when she saw me, but her legendary sharp instincts were already at work. She took in my appearance, noting the distinct lack of a husband by my side and the subtle tension radiating from my posture. "Happy birthday, Grandma," I said, leaning down to kiss her cheek. "You look absolutely beautiful tonight." She patted my hand, her eyes locking onto mine. "Thank you, Maya," she said, her voice clear and commanding. "But tell me something. I was looking out the front window a moment ago. Why did you come by taxi? What happened to the Audi I gave you for your birthday?" My mother Vivian had followed me to the table and immediately inserted herself into the conversation. She let out a high-pitched, completely artificial laugh and placed a hand on my shoulder, squeezing it as a warning. Before I could answer, my mom smiled and said that Audi belongs to her younger sister now. Maya generously transferred the title to Chloe this morning. She knew Chloe needed a safe, reliable vehicle for her new internship. It was such a beautiful sisterly gesture. The air around the table grew suddenly cold. Grandma Beatrice did not smile. She did not praise the supposed generosity. She did not even acknowledge my mother. Grandma fell silent. Her piercing gaze remained fixed on me, reading the absolute truth in my eyes. She knew I cherished that car. She knew I would never willingly hand it over to a sister who treated me like garbage. Then she turned to her attorney, who signed the title of that Audi over to her. The question hung in the air, heavy and dangerous. My mother froze, her plastic smile instantly shattering. My father Richard, who had just walked over to join the conversation, suddenly stopped in his tracks. The color drained completely from his face, leaving him looking pale and sickly under the bright ballroom lights. He began to sweat profusely, wiping his forehead with a cocktail napkin. "It was just an internal family transfer," Richard stammered, his voice shaking as he looked between Beatrice and the formidable attorney Sterling. "Just a simple paperwork update, Beatrice. Nothing to worry your head about on your special night. We handled everything internally to save time." Maya agreed to it, of course. I stood perfectly still, watching my father lie directly to the matriarch of our family. I did not say a single word. I let his lie sit there exposed and trembling in front of everyone. Attorney Sterling did not ask another question. He did not wait for a better explanation. He simply reached into the inner pocket of his suit jacket and pulled out his cell phone. He adjusted his glasses and looked directly at my sweating father. An internal family transfer, Sterling repeated, his voice completely devoid of warmth. How fascinating, Richard. Let us verify that simple paperwork update right now. Sterling dialed a number and pressed the phone to his ear. I am calling the regional director of the Department of Motor Vehicles, Sterling announced to the table. He is a personal friend of mine and he happens to owe me a rather large favor. He will be able to tell us exactly who authorized the transfer of a $100,000 vehicle within the last 24 hours. My father looked like he was going to vomit. My mother grabbed his arm, her breathing becoming rapid and shallow. The grand ballroom continued to buzz with music and laughter, completely oblivious to the massive explosion that was about to detonate at the VIP table. I watched Sterling wait for the other end of the line to pick up, my heart pounding with a fierce, relentless rhythm. My husband and my parents thought they could steal from me in the dark. They were about to be burned alive in the glorious blazing light. Attorney Sterling held his phone to his ear with the motionless patience of a predator waiting for its prey. The opulent ballroom of my grandmother's Buckhead mansion continued to hum with the oblivious chatter of Atlanta's elite. Waiters glided past balancing trays of champagne, but the air around our table had turned into a vacuum. My father Richard was visibly hyperventilating. A bead of sweat rolled down his temple and caught in the collar of his expensive tuxedo. He looked like a man standing on the trapdoor of a gallows. My mother. Vivian clutched her sequined purse so tightly, her knuckles looked like polished bone under the chandelier lights. I kept my eyes locked on Sterling. He gave a sharp nod into the receiver. Sterling ended the call and placed his phone face down on the silk tablecloth. His gaze shifted from my father to my grandmother, and finally to me. The transfer was processed electronically, 48 hours ago. Sterling announced, his voice dropping an octave so only our table could hear the devastating truth. According to the Department of Motor Vehicles, the title of the Audi was completely signed over to your sister Chloe today. The document was executed using a digital notary seal, Sterling continued. Furthermore, it bears your exact digital signature, Maya. A heavy, suffocating silence crashed over our small circle. My mind struggled to process the sheer mechanics of what he was saying. I had been in Chicago dealing with a corporate media crisis. I had barely slept, let alone logged into any legal portal to forfeit my own luxury vehicle. I did not sign a single document. I stated, my voice cutting through the tension with absolute certainty. I have been completely out of state for 3 long weeks. My digital signature requires two-factor authentication and a secure password, I explained to the table. Someone had to intentionally bypass my security protocols to steal my car. My grandmother Beatrice slowly turned her head toward my father. The look in her eyes was not just anger. It was the cold, calculating wrath of a woman who had built an empire from the ground up and destroyed anyone who tried to compromise it. Richard, she said softly. Her quiet tone was far more terrifying than a scream. Would you care to tell me how it miraculously appeared on a title transfer while she was 2,000 miles away? Before my father could formulate a pathetic excuse, my mother lunged into action. Vivian stepped directly into my personal space, grabbing my upper arm. Her perfectly manicured acrylic nails dug so deeply into my flesh that I almost gasped. Maya, she hissed through a terrifying plastic smile intended for any lingering photographers nearby. You are just confused from your trip. You told Jamal to handle the paperwork before you left. Remember, you are making a massive fool of yourself in front of the mayor and half the city council right now. Do not do this tonight. You are going to ruin your father's networking opportunities. I looked down at her hand, gripping my arm like a vice. I felt the familiar childhood instinct to shrink, to apologize, to absorb the blame, just to make her stop hurting me. But that little girl was gone forever. I forcefully yanked my arm out of her grasp. Do not ever touch me like that again, Mom, I said loud enough for everyone at the neighboring table to glance over. I did not authorize anything. My car was stolen. You and Dad orchestrated this, and Jamal handed you the keys. Vivian let out a frantic, breathless laugh, looking desperately toward my grandmother. Mother, she is having an episode. You know how the stress of her little public relations job affects her mental state. She is practically hallucinating. The sharp crack of heavy wood striking marble echoed across the entire room. Grandma Beatrice had lifted her silver-handled cane and slammed it down onto the floor with the force of a judge delivering a final verdict. The sound was so violently sudden that the jazz band actually stopped playing for a fleeting second. The surrounding guests froze, turning their heads toward our table in shock. "Enough," Beatrice commanded. Her voice echoed with absolute unyielding authority. "I did not build this family to watch it operate like a den of common thieves." She stood up slowly, leaning on her cane but radiating pure dominance. "Richard, you will look at me when I am speaking to you." My father jerked his head up, swallowing hard. "A felony has been committed within my family," Beatrice declared, her tone dripping with disgust. "Forging a signature and stealing property is a crime. I do not care about your social standing, Vivian. I do not care about your networking, Richard. I expect the absolute truth and a full explanation sitting on my desk by sunrise. If I do not have a satisfactory answer before my morning coffee, I will have Sterling involve the Atlanta Police Department. I will personally watch you explain this internal family transfer to a detective." She turned to me, her expression softening just a fraction. "Go home, Maya. Get out of this snake pit. Sterling and I will handle this tomorrow." I did not say goodbye to my parents. I turned my back on them and walked away, leaving them to drown in the panic of their own making. I moved quickly through the grand foyer, retrieving my coat and stepping out into the cool Atlanta night. I ordered another rideshare and stood on the driveway, my mind racing a million miles an hour. The cool breeze hit my face, but my blood felt like it was boiling. As I climbed into the back of the car and watched the mansion fade into the distance, the pieces of the puzzle began clicking together with sickening precision. Jamal had been lounging on the couch, entirely too comfortable with the fact that my car was gone. Jamal knew my schedule. Jamal was the only person besides me who had access to my home office. Then the realization hit me like a freight train. My digital notary seal was locked on my encrypted desktop computer. Jamal was a financial analyst working in data. He knew how to bypass security hurdles if he had physical access to my machine. If Jamal had logged into my encrypted system to forge a vehicle title transfer, what else had he touched? A horrifying suspicion crept down my spine, wrapping around my heart like a vice. My physical safe, where I kept my business ledgers, my banking tokens, and my emergency funds, was in that same office. If he had sold out my car to buy my parents' approval, the car might not have been the only thing missing. The car might not have been the only thing he signed away. I leaned forward and instructed the driver to please step on it immediately. I needed to get home immediately. I pulled out my phone and tried to remotely access my home security cameras. The application spun and loaded, but the feed was completely black. Someone had disconnected the local network. My chest tightened as a wave of nausea washed over me. I opened my banking application next, but my fingers were trembling so badly I dropped the phone onto the floorboard. I picked it up and stared at the login screen. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay entirely rational. I was a crisis manager. This was a massive crisis. I typed in my password and hit enter. The bright digital screen loaded my business accounts first. They appeared completely untouched. Then I switched the view to my personal savings and investment accounts. The numbers on the screen did not make any sense. I blinked rapidly, trying to clear my vision. I refreshed the application, hoping it was just a terrible glitch. It was not a glitch. The balance was wrong. A massive, staggering sum of money had simply vanished entirely. $200,000 was gone from my primary savings account. The transaction history showed a wire transfer authorized and finalized 48 hours ago, the exact same time my car title was forged. My husband had not just stolen my vehicle to impress my spoiled sister, he had cleaned out my life savings. A cold, terrifying clarity finally settled over me as the Uber sped down the darkened highway toward our neighborhood. Jamal and my incredibly toxic parents had conspired to rob me completely blind while I was away working. They truly thought I was a naive, compliant scapegoat who would never fight back against her own blood. They believed I would weep silently and let them drain my entire existence dry to preserve their fake image. They were about to learn exactly what happens when you decide to cross a professional crisis manager who has nothing left to lose anymore. The ride back to my suburban home felt agonizingly slow. I sat in the back of the sedan watching the streetlights bleed together into long streaks of yellow and white. My phone buzzed continuously with incoming calls from my mother and my father, but I ignored every single one. I blocked their numbers, and then I blocked Jamal's number too. I needed absolute silence to execute my next moves. The moment the driver pulled up to my dark house, I thanked him, tipped him generously, and rushed to the front door. The house was exactly as I had left it, quiet and seemingly undisturbed. But the air inside felt entirely different now. It felt contaminated. I bypassed the living room and headed straight for my home office at the end of the hallway. This room was my sanctuary. It was where I built my public relations agency from a laptop into a thriving business. Behind my heavy mahogany desk, a steel floor safe bolted directly into the foundation. This was where I kept my most sensitive physical documents, client contracts, emergency cash reserves, and the encrypted backup drives for my business ledgers. I knelt on the hardwood floor and reached for the digital keypad. A harsh red light flashed on the panel, followed by a sharp rejecting beep. I frowned. I pressed the clear button and typed the code again, slower this time, ensuring every single digit was correct. The red light flashed again. The screen blinked the word locked. My stomach plummeted into my shoes. I rocked back on my heels, staring at the heavy steel door. The passcode had been changed. Jamal was the only other person living in this house. He knew where I kept the safe. He knew the brand and the model. As a financial data analyst, he knew exactly how to reset a digital lock by ordering a factory override key, using our home address and my business credentials while I was away in Chicago. I did not waste time crying. I pulled out my phone and searched for an emergency 24-hour commercial locksmith in the Atlanta area. I found a highly rated company that promised a 30-minute response time for an exorbitant fee. I called the number and told the dispatcher I needed a heavy-duty steel safe drilled open immediately, and I was willing to pay triple their emergency rate in cash. The 25 minutes I spent waiting for the locksmith were the longest of my entire life. I paced the length of my office, my mind running through every possible worst-case scenario. If Jamal had broken into my safe, he had access to my life. He had access to my business accounts, my personal routing numbers, and the physical tokens required for high-tier wire transfers. When the doorbell finally rang, I practically sprinted to answer it. A burly man in a gray uniform stood on the porch holding a massive toolbox. I showed him my identification and the deed to the house to prove I was the owner. I led him straight to the office and pointed to the steel box under the window. "I need it open," I said, my voice entirely devoid of panic. "Do whatever it takes. Destroy the lock if you have to. I just need to get inside tonight." The locksmith nodded and got to work. For 45 grueling minutes, the sound of heavy drilling echoed through my quiet house. The smell of burning metal filled the air as his diamond-tipped drill bit chewed through the hardened steel plate. I stood by the door with my arms crossed, watching the metal shavings pile up on the hardwood floor. Finally, with a loud mechanical clank, the locking mechanism gave way. The locksmith pulled the heavy lever and the steel door swung open. I paid him the cash I had in my emergency desk drawer, thanked him for his speed, and locked the front door behind him. I rushed back to the office and dropped to my knees in front of the open safe. My hands shook as I reached inside. It was completely ransacked. My neatly organized manila folders were torn open and thrown back inside haphazardly. My emergency cash envelope was completely gone. But what made my blood run cold was the missing black leather pouch. That pouch held the physical security tokens generated by my bank. They were small devices that generated random digital codes required to authorize any wire transfer over $50,000. Jamal had taken them. I scrambled to my feet and threw myself into my desk chair. I woke up my desktop computer. Jamal had disconnected the local internet network, but he had not taken my actual hard drive. I quickly connected my computer to my cell phone using a mobile hotspot, bypassing the router he had tampered with. I opened my encrypted browser and navigated to my primary banking portal. My fingers slipped on the keyboard twice before I managed to type my secure login credentials. I hit enter and the dashboard loaded. The bright white screen illuminated my dark office, showing my business operating accounts first. They were secure. Then I clicked the tab for my primary personal savings account. This was the account where I kept the bulk of my liquid wealth, the money I had saved from my very first major PR contract, the money I was holding to eventually purchase commercial real estate for my agency. The balance was almost zero. I stopped breathing. The number on the screen simply did not compute in my brain. I leaned closer to the monitor, my eyes scanning the transaction history. There was a single massive line item finalized 48 hours ago. $200,000 had been wired out of my account. I clicked on the transaction details, my heart hammering violently against my ribs. The transfer required dual authorization because of the massive amount. It required a digital signature from my secure portal and a physical code from the bank token. Jamal had both. He had used my computer while I was out of town to initiate the transfer, and he had broken into my safe to use the physical token to approve it. He had stolen my entire life savings with a few clicks of a mouse. I stared at the screen, feeling a cold wave of absolute betrayal wash over my entire body. My husband had not just stolen my car to impress my terrible family. He had methodically planned a massive financial heist against me. He had gutted my savings and left me with pennies. But Jamal was arrogant. He was a financial analyst, but he was not a cybersecurity expert. He thought covering his tracks meant simply disconnecting the home router before he left for the gala tonight. He forgot that every single high-tier banking transaction leaves a very specific digital footprint. I opened a secondary program on my computer. Working in crisis management meant I had to know how to track digital leaks and trace anonymous sources. I pulled the detailed transaction receipt from the banking portal and extracted the authorization log. The bank recorded the exact IP address of the device used to confirm the physical token code. I copied the IP address and ran it through a geolocation tracking software I used for my corporate clients. A map of Atlanta popped up on my screen. A red pin dropped directly into the heart of the city. I zoomed in on the map, my eyes narrowing as the street names became clear. The IP address did not trace back to our suburban home network. The final authorization had been executed from a completely different location. The red pin hovered over a building on Peachtree Street. I opened a new browser tab and searched the exact address. High-resolution photos flooded my screen. It was an ultra-luxury high-rise condominium complex in Midtown Atlanta. The kind of building that boasted rooftop infinity pools, private elevator access, and 24-hour concierge service. The rent for a basic unit in that building would easily cost $5,000 a month. I had absolutely no idea this place existed. I had never been to Midtown with Jamal for anything other than dinner dates. I pulled up the public property tax records for Fulton County and typed in the building address, searching for unit ownership data within the last 6 months. The database processed the request and spit out a single matching record. Penthouse Unit 42. Registered owner Jamal Davis. My husband owned a luxury penthouse in the middle of the city. He had bought it secretly. He had used my stolen car to buy my parents' silence, and he had used my stolen money to fund a hidden life. I slammed my laptop shut. The sheer gravity of his deception anchored me to the chair for a moment. He had constructed an entire alternate reality while sleeping in my bed and eating at my table. He played the part of a loving, supportive husband while actively draining my lifeblood to fuel his own selfish fantasies. I refused to shed a single tear for a man who viewed me merely as an automated teller machine. I stood up and pushed the chair away. I grabbed my keys and my pepper spray. I was going to Midtown right now tonight. I grabbed the keys to my rental sedan, refusing to take another rideshare tonight. It was exactly 2 in the morning when I merged onto the interstate heading straight for Midtown Atlanta. The city was asleep, but my mind operated at maximum capacity. Adrenaline completely overrode the exhaustion of my 3-week business trip. Navigating the glowing streets, I mentally reviewed high-rise security protocols. having handled crisis management for real estate developers before I knew wealthy residents often use digital bypass codes for guests. At a red light, I accessed the synchronized backup of Jamal's emails on my secure server. It took less than 3 minutes to find it. An active guest entry code saved under property management. I parked 2 blocks away from the towering glass building on Peachtree Street. I avoided the valet cameras. The night air was warm, but I felt only ice-cold determination. I walked confidently through the revolving front doors. The lobby featured imported Italian marble and a cascading water wall. The night concierge was busy assisting another resident. I walked past them toward the secure resident elevators. I punched the 6-digit bypass code into the glowing digital keypad. A soft chime echoed, and the heavy elevator doors slid open instantly. I stepped inside and pressed the button for the 42nd floor. The elevator shot upward, but my heart remained perfectly steady. I was no longer a betrayed wife in the dark. I was a professional operating in my element. The doors opened into a private foyer. It was a multi-million-dollar penthouse suite with floor-to-ceiling windows, offering a panoramic view of the Atlanta skyline. Moonlight spilled across expensive leather furniture I had unknowingly paid for. I walked silently across the plush white carpet toward a faint light spilling from the hallway. I gripped the pepper spray in my pocket, my thumb resting firmly on the safety latch. I was prepared for physical danger, but I was not prepared for the specific brand of psychological warfare waiting behind that door. I stood outside the bedroom listening to the rustle of expensive sheets. I did not knock. I lifted my foot and kicked the door open, sending it crashing against the interior wall. I slammed my hand against the light switch, flooding the room with blinding white illumination. 2 figures jolted upright in the bed, scrambling against the sudden intrusion. It was not a random woman or a secret girlfriend. Sitting next to my husband, clutching a white sheet to her chest with wide, terrified eyes, was my own younger sister, Chloe. The absolute depravity of the scene hit me with the force of a physical blow. The golden child of my family, the sister my parents worshipped, the woman who was currently parading around Buckhead in my stolen Audi, was sleeping in a secret penthouse with my husband. For a fraction of a second, the sheer horror of it threatened to break me. But then the crisis manager inside my brain took the wheel. I did not scream. I did not cry. I did not drop to the floor in a puddle of tears. I stood perfectly still, my posture rigid and my expression entirely unreadable. Maya Jamal choked out, his voice cracking with absolute panic. He scrambled backward, tangling his legs in the sheets. Maya, wait. I can explain this. Please just listen to me. I ignored him completely. My eyes were locked onto my sister. The initial shock on Chloe's face vanished almost instantly. Once she realized I was not going to physically attack her, a sickeningly familiar arrogance washed over her features. She did not look ashamed. She did not look guilty. She looked entirely triumphant. Chloe slowly pushed the white sheet aside and stood up from the bed. She walked over to the armchair in the corner and picked up a garment. I felt a fresh wave of disgust wash over me as she slipped her arms into a custom emerald green silk robe. It was my robe. I had ordered it from a boutique in Paris 2 years ago. She tied the silk sash around her waist and crossed her arms, staring at me with a deeply malicious smirk. You always think you are so much better than me, Maya. Chloe sneered, her voice dripping with venom. You walk around with your little business and your independent attitude, acting like you do not need anyone. But look at you now. You have absolutely nothing. Mom chose me, Dad chose me, and now even your own husband chose me over you. I watched her parade around the bedroom wearing my clothes in a penthouse bought with my money. You are pathetic, Chloe, I said, my voice dangerously calm. You are a 24-year-old child playing house with a coward. You think this makes you special. You are just another little thing he stole from me tonight. Chloe's smirk deepened into a full-blown laugh. You really do not get it, do you, Maya? She taunted, stepping closer to the foot of the bed. You were never the priority. You were just the bankroll. You were the strict sister who existed solely to fund the lifestyle the rest of us actually deserve. Jamal prefers me because I am fun. I am the kind of woman a successful man actually wants on his arm. Not some stressed-out workaholic who cares more about client emails than her own marriage. Jamal was hyperventilating now. He grabbed his pants from the floor and frantically pulled them on, hopping on one foot. Maya, please, Jamal begged, holding his hands up in a placating gesture. This is a massive mistake. Do not do anything crazy. Do not call my firm. If this gets out, it will completely ruin my career. I am up for a senior partnership next month. You know how strict their morality clauses are. Please, Maya, do not destroy my life over this. I looked at the pathetic man I had married. He was not begging for his marriage. He was not apologizing for destroying my heart or sleeping with my sister. He was begging for his corporate job. He was terrified of losing his status in the Atlanta financial sector. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my cell phone. I opened the camera application, switched it to video mode, and hit the red record button. The small red light blinked steadily, capturing both of them in the frame. Put the phone down, Maya, Jamal pleaded, taking a nervous step toward me. Please do not record this. We can settle this privately. I raised the canister of pepper spray with my left hand, aiming the nozzle directly at his eyes while holding the recording phone steady with my right. Take one more step toward me, Jamal, and I will blind you, I stated clearly. I watched him freeze, his eyes darting between the pepper spray and the glowing lens of my camera. I am not here to ask about your disgusting affair, I said, my voice echoing coldly in the large bedroom. I do not care that you are sleeping with my sister. You two deserve each other. I am here for one reason and one reason only. I took a step forward, keeping the camera perfectly framed on Jamal's sweating face. I logged into my secure banking portal tonight, I said, watching the color completely drain from his cheeks. I saw the wire transfer. I saw the physical token authorization. So I am going to ask you this once, and you are going to answer me on the record. Where did the $200,000 go, Jamal? Jamal opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked absolutely terrified. He glanced frantically at Chloe, silently pleading with her to keep her mouth shut. But Chloe was fueled by arrogance and a deeply rooted desire to crush me entirely. She did not understand the gravity of financial crimes. She only truly understood pure, unimaginable cruelty. Chloe threw her head back and laughed, a loud, shrill sound that bounced off the penthouse windows. Oh, Maya, she mocked, wrapping my robe tighter around her body. You are so stupid. You think Jamal took that money for us. You really have no idea what is actually happening in your own family, do you? Jamal did not take your money for himself, Maya. He took it directly for Dad. Dad, I asked, keeping my tone entirely flat. Why would Dad need my money? Because Dad is completely broke, Maya. Chloe sneered, spilling the darkest secret of them all with absolute joy. His investment fund is a total sham. He embezzled millions from Grandma Beatrice's portfolio to cover his bad trades. He promised Jamal a senior partnership and a huge payout if he could secure the cash tonight. Your car was collateral for a loan shark until the wire transferred. The silence in the penthouse bedroom was deafening after Chloe dropped her absolute bombshell. My mind, which was usually capable of untangling the most complex corporate public relations disasters, temporarily stalled. My father, Richard, the man who paraded around Atlanta in custom-tailored suits and sneered at my self-made business, was completely broke. He was a fraud. He had stolen from his own mother to cover his financial incompetence, and my husband had happily played the role of his willing accomplice. Jamal lunged forward, grabbing Chloe's arm and shaking her violently. Shut your mouth, Chloe, he hissed, his voice cracking with unfiltered panic. Do you have any idea what you are saying right now? You are confessing to federal crimes on camera. Are you out of your mind? Chloe simply yanked her arm away from his grasp, her arrogant smile never wavering. She adjusted my emerald green silk robe around her shoulders and looked at him with utter disdain. Oh, relax, Jamal, she scoffed, rolling her eyes. Maya is not going to do anything with that video. She is a coward. She always has been. She will protect the family reputation because that is what she was trained to do. Mom and Dad will just tell her to keep her mouth shut, and she will fall right in line like the good little scapegoat she is. I kept the camera lens pointed directly at her face, ensuring the lighting captured every single malicious detail of her expression. I am not putting the phone down, Chloe, I said, my voice dangerously level. Tell me about the audit. Tell me exactly why my father needed my $200,000 so desperately tonight. Chloe laughed again, entirely pleased with herself. She loved having the upper hand. She loved feeling like she was part of the adult secrets while I was left in the dark. Dad's investment fund got hit with a massive margin call, she explained proudly, as if she were reciting an impressive academic achievement. He has been moving money out of Grandma Beatrice's real estate portfolio for months to cover his terrible stock bets. But Beatrice ordered a surprise quarterly audit of all her accounts. The auditors are arriving on Monday morning. Dad needed liquid cash immediately to replace the missing funds before Sterling and the accountants realized he was embezzling. I shifted my gaze to Jamal, keeping him in the camera frame. "And you helped him," I stated, watching him sweat. "You stole my life savings to bail out a failing old man. Why?" Jamal wiped his forehead, his chest heaving as he stared at the red recording light. "Because Richard promised me a senior partnership at his firm," Jamal confessed, the words tumbling out of him in a desperate rush. "He promised me a massive return on the investment once the market rebounded. He said we would be unstoppable, Maya. I was doing it for our future. I was securing my place in the Atlanta financial elite. Your dad said you would never agree to help him because you are too rigid about money. I had to take it. I was going to put it back before you even noticed." "You are a complete fool, Jamal," I said, my tone laced with absolute disgust. "Richard does not have a future. His firm is bleeding money. You bought a ticket on a sinking ship and you used my money to pay for it." "And what about my car?" I demanded, shifting my attention back to my sister. "How exactly does my Audi fit into this pathetic financial conspiracy?" Chloe sighed, playing with the silk belt of my robe. "Dad needed cash immediately, but transferring massive amounts of money takes time. He needed a bridge loan to hold him over until Jamal's wire transfer cleared the international banking hurdles. So Dad went to a private lender, an underground loan shark in Bankhead. The guy demanded physical collateral up front before handing over that kind of cash to cover the margin call. Dad did not want to risk his own Mercedes, so he told Jamal to give him your Audi. The loan shark is holding the car right now. Dad forged the title transfer to me so he could claim it was a family gift if anyone asked questions about why the car suddenly disappeared from your driveway." The sheer magnitude of their stupidity washed over me like a tidal wave. My father had taken my luxury vehicle given to me by my grandmother and handed it over to a dangerous criminal as collateral for a highly illegal underground loan. He had committed grand larceny, embezzlement, and forgery, all within 48 hours. And my husband had funded the entire operation using my hard-earned cash, all for the empty promise of a partnership at a bankrupt firm. "Turn the camera off!" Maya Jamal demanded, his tone shifting from pleading to aggressive. He took a heavy step toward me, his hands balling into fists. "You have your explanation. You know everything now. Delete the video right now, and we can figure out a way to fix this before Monday." "There is absolutely no fixing this, Jamal," I said, refusing to take a single step backward. "You committed wire fraud. You bypassed my dual authentication security protocols. You broke into my physical safe to steal my bank tokens. That is not a marital dispute. That is a federal crime. You are going to prison, and my father is going with you." The reality of my words finally pierced through Jamal's thick skull. The panic in his eyes morphed into pure, unadulterated rage. He realized that his career, his social standing, and his freedom were entirely dependent on the digital file currently saving to my secure cloud server. He let out a primal, desperate yell and lunged directly at me. I was taller and heavier, but I was completely prepared. I did not flinch, and I did not scream. As Jamal lunged forward, reaching violently for my phone, I sidestepped his initial grab. I raised my left hand and aimed the canister of maximum-strength pepper spray directly at his face. I pressed my thumb down hard on the trigger, unleashing a thick, focused stream of burning chemical right into his open eyes. Jamal let out a blood-curdling shriek of absolute agony. He instantly dropped to his knees on the plush white carpet, clutching his face with both hands. He thrashed blindly, knocking over a glass side table and sending a heavy lamp crashing to the floor. The concentrated capsaicin immediately seized his respiratory system, causing him to cough violently and gasp for air. Chloe screamed in horror as the acrid chemical cloud began to spread through the enclosed bedroom. "What did you do?" she shrieked, covering her mouth and nose with the sleeve of my silk robe. "Are you insane, Maya?" I did not answer her. I quickly backed away from the thrashing man on the floor, keeping a safe distance. I tapped the screen of my phone, stopping the recording and immediately uploading the video file to 3 separate encrypted cloud servers. I locked my phone and slid it safely into my pocket. My hands were shaking slightly from the adrenaline, but my mind remained perfectly clear. "You are going to regret this, Maya." Chloe coughed, her eyes beginning to water profusely from the residual pepper spray in the air. "Mom and Dad are going to destroy you for doing this to us." I looked at my sister, coughing and wiping her streaming eyes in the middle of a luxury penthouse that was funded by my stolen money. "Tell Mom and Dad to prepare for war," I said, my voice completely steady. "Because I am burning this entire family to the ground." I turned my back on them and walked purposefully out of the bedroom. I left Jamal violently retching on the floor and Chloe screaming insults that quickly turned into uncontrollable coughing fits. I moved swiftly through the expensive private foyer and punched the call button for the elevator. The doors opened immediately, and I stepped inside the mirrored cab. As the elevator began its rapid descent toward the lobby, my entire perspective shifted permanently. I was no longer dealing with a simple case of a cheating husband and a jealous, spoiled sister. I was not just dealing with the toxic family dynamics that had plagued my entire existence. The stakes had escalated into a realm of pure corporate fraud, criminal extortion, and desperate, dangerous people. My father was entangled with underground loan sharks. He had stolen millions from the most powerful woman in Atlanta. He was backed into a corner and facing absolute ruin. Desperate men with everything to lose were the most dangerous adversaries on the planet. I walked out of the luxury high-rise and into the cool Atlanta night air. The city was completely silent, but a massive storm was brewing on my horizon. I reached my rental car and locked the doors behind me. I sat in the driver's seat, staring at the steering wheel. My family had expected me to quietly absorb this loss. They expected me to protect their secrets, to preserve their fake social status, and to sacrifice my own life to save my father's failing reputation. They had significantly underestimated me for the very last time. I was going to use every single resource, every crisis management tactic, and every ounce of my professional skill to expose them. I started the engine, the low hum grounding my racing thoughts. I needed to build a bulletproof arsenal of evidence before sunrise. I needed to assemble allies who carried enough power to shield me from my mother's inevitable counterattack. I pulled away from the curb, merging onto the empty street. The game had completely changed, and I was now playing for absolute destruction. The morning sun crept over the Atlanta skyline, casting long shadows across the empty parking lot of my public relations firm. I had not slept a single minute. I spent the hours between 3 and 8 in the morning, securely backing up the confession video, verifying the bank transfer logs, and locking down every single piece of digital evidence I possessed. I sat at my massive glass desk, nursing my 4th cup of black coffee, when the digital onslaught officially began. At exactly 8 o'clock, my cell phone ignited. It did not just ring, it vibrated violently against the glass surface with an endless barrage of incoming notifications. I watched the screen light up with dozens of missed calls and rapid-fire text messages. They were not from panicked criminals begging for mercy. They were from Richard, Vivian, Jamal, and Chloe. In the span of a few hours, they had recovered from the shock of my raid and formed a completely unified, aggressive front. They realized they had everything to lose, and they decided the only way to survive was to destroy me first. My mother, Vivian, sent a wall of text filled with staggering manipulation. "Maya, we love you, but you are deeply unwell." She wrote her words dripping with fake maternal concern. "You need psychiatric help immediately. Your father and I are terrified of what you might do next. Please turn yourself into a hospital before we are forced to take legal action for your violent outburst against your husband." I stared at the screen, letting out a harsh, humorless laugh. It was a classic preemptive strike. They were trying to establish a narrative of insanity before I could expose their financial crimes. If I was deemed mentally unstable, any accusation I made about embezzlement or stolen cars would be dismissed as the wild ravings of a broken woman. 10 minutes later, my personal email chimed with a forwarded message from a cousin who always stayed out of the family drama. The subject line read, "Urgent Family Prayer Meeting." I opened the email and found a mass invitation Vivian had sent to our entire extended family, our church leaders, and half the members of their prestigious country club. She had completely excluded me from the guest list, but ensured everyone else in our elite social circle was present for an emergency breakfast gathering. My cousin had attached an audio note outlining what Vivian had told the crowded room. I sat in my quiet office and listened to my own mother assassinate my character with ruthless precision. According to Vivian, the immense pressure of running a corporate public relations agency had finally shattered my mental state. She tearfully explained to the horrified relatives that I had suffered a massive psychotic break. She claimed I was hallucinating ridiculous affairs between Jamal and my sweet innocent sister Chloe. She told the room that I had willingly gifted the Audi to Chloe days ago out of sisterly love, but my fractured mind had warped the memory, causing me to believe it was stolen. Vivienne did not stop there. She escalated the lie to cover the physical evidence of the night before. She wept openly as she described how I had burst into a hotel room in a manic rage and viciously attacked my loving husband Jamal with chemical spray completely unprovoked. She painted Jamal as a devoted martyr who was desperately trying to get me the medical help I needed. She painted Richard as a heartbroken father, carrying the burden of his eldest daughter's tragic mental decline. I paused the audio recording, feeling a cold knot form in my stomach. The manipulation was genuinely masterful. She knew exactly which buttons to push within the conservative image-obsessed circles of Black elite Atlanta. Mental health struggles were highly stigmatized, and she was weaponizing that stigma to discredit my entire existence. She was isolating me from any potential family support by branding me as dangerous and delusional. Anyone who might have questioned why my car was suddenly in Chloe's possession, or why my marriage was ending now, had a perfectly packaged tragic explanation. But the assault was not just limited to hushed country club conversations. At 9:30, the real digital warfare began. I navigated to my social media monitoring dashboard, a tool I use daily to protect my corporate clients. Today, the alerts were entirely focused on my own name. Keisha, Jamal's older sister, and Chloe's best friend, had officially entered the battlefield. Keisha was a notorious socialite who ran one of Atlanta's most popular urban gossip blogs. She thrived on tearing successful women down, and she had an enormous, highly engaged audience. She had weaponized her platform to execute a coordinated smear campaign against me. I watched in real time as blind items and anonymous tips flooded the internet. The first post featured a blurred silhouette of a woman in a business suit. The caption read, "Which Buckhead PR darling has completely lost her grip on reality?" Rumor has it, this so-called self-made boss is currently experiencing a massive manic breakdown. Sources say she physically attacked her husband and is now terrorizing her sweet college grad sister out of pure barren jealousy. Money cannot buy sanity, ladies. The comments section exploded immediately. People were tagging my agency, guessing my identity, and dissecting my marriage. Keisha did not stop at blind items. She mobilized her extensive network of sorority alumni. Chloe was an active darling of their sisterhood, and Keisha rallied the women to protect one of their own. They flooded my professional agency pages with fake one-star reviews, claiming I was unprofessional, unstable, and hostile. They flooded LinkedIn with veiled posts about the importance of working with mentally fit executives. They were spinning a narrative that I was a bitter, aging workaholic who had alienated her loving husband and was now taking out her misery on her youthful, beautiful sister. The sheer volume of the digital attack was staggering. They were flooding the zone with so much noise and toxicity that the actual truth, the fraud, the embezzlement, the stolen money was being completely buried under a mountain of sensationalized gossip. I sat back in my leather chair watching the analytics dashboard light up with negative sentiment markers. My heart pounded a steady, relentless rhythm against my ribs. This was the exact playbook I warned my clients about. When guilty people are backed into a corner, they do not confess. They attack the credibility of the whistleblower. They muddy the waters until the public cannot tell the difference between the victim and the villain. I reached for my coffee mug, but my hand paused midair as my office desk phone began to ring. It was not my secure personal line. It was my direct corporate extension. I glanced at the caller identification display and felt the air evacuate from my lungs. It was the chief of staff for the mayor of Atlanta. He was one of my most prominent and lucrative clients. We were currently managing a highly sensitive infrastructure initiative for the city. I answered the phone, forcing my voice to remain professionally neutral. "Good morning, Marcus. What can I do for you today?" Maya Marcus said, his tone devoid of its usual warmth. "I am calling because my office is receiving some very concerning inquiries from local media outlets. They are asking for comments regarding your current mental fitness and some sort of domestic violence incident involving your family. I need to know exactly what is going on right now." I closed my eyes tightly. My family had actually contacted the press. They were leaking the fabricated story to mainstream local news stations to force my client's hands. "Marcus," I said, choosing my words with extreme caution, "I am currently dealing with a highly coordinated extortion attempt executed by estranged family members. The rumors circulating are entirely false, and I am initiating aggressive legal action today to stop the defamation." Marcus sighed heavily, a sound that communicated pure political liability. "Maya, you know how this city operates. We are in the middle of a major public relations push for the new transit bill. We cannot afford to be associated with scandal or erratic behavior. The optics are terrible. If these rumors gain any more traction, we are going to have to suspend your contract pending an investigation. We need distance from this mess." "I understand, Marcus," I replied, maintaining a calm exterior while my chest constricted with panic. "I assure you this will be handled swiftly and decisively." I hung up the phone just as my email chimed with another notification. It was from the marketing director of a major national beverage brand, my second largest account. The subject line read, "Urgent request to pause campaign operations." They had seen the social media backlash. They were pulling back their budget to protect their brand safety. I pushed my chair away from the desk and stood up, pacing the length of my office. The walls felt like they were closing in on me. My mother and my husband were systematically destroying everything I had spent the last 7 years building. They were dismantling my reputation, my income, and my credibility hour by hour. They knew exactly how to hurt me. They knew that without my business, I had absolutely nothing to fall back on. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window and looked out at the bustling city below. I was completely isolated. My family had branded me a lunatic. My husband had robbed me blind. The elite social circles of Atlanta were currently feasting on my downfall, and my major corporate clients were preparing to jump ship. My entire life's work was hanging by a frayed and rapidly snapping thread. If I released the video of Chloe and Jamal, right now, the local blogs would just write it off as an AI-generated fake or a desperate act of a crazy woman. If I went to the police about the stolen car and the missing $200,000, it would trigger a massive public investigation that would permanently tie my professional name to a sordid underground loan shark scandal. The negative press would guarantee the loss of every client I had left. My parents had engineered the perfect trap. If I fought back publicly, I ruined my business. If I stayed silent, I lost my money, my car, and my dignity. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass of the window. They thought they had backed me into an inescapable corner. They thought I would surrender the $200,000 and sign quiet divorce papers just to make the public humiliation stop. They wanted me to beg for mercy. I stepped away from the window and walked back to my desk. I reached into my bag and pulled out the physical drive, holding the backup of the confession video. I was not going to beg. I was going to change the battlefield entirely. I gripped the physical drive tightly in my hand, feeling the sharp plastic edges press into my palm. The entire building around me hummed with the usual morning corporate activity, but my private office felt like a war zone. I had just finished mapping out my counter-offensive strategy when a sudden loud commotion erupted out in the reception area. My heavy glass door flew open with a violent crash. My executive assistant Sarah stumbled backward, trying desperately to block the entryway. "I am so sorry, Maya." Sarah stammered, her eyes wide with absolute panic. "I told her you were unavailable and dealing with urgent client calls, but she pushed right past security." I raised my hand, signaling for Sarah to stop. "It is fine, Sarah," I said, maintaining my composed, professional voice. You can go back to your desk. Hold all my calls for the next 20 minutes. Please close the door behind you. Sarah nodded quickly, retreating to safety and pulling the heavy door shut. The loud click of the lock echoed through the room. I remained seated behind my massive desk, refusing to stand or offer any form of greeting. Standing directly in front of me was my mother, Vivienne. She looked absolutely immaculate. She wore a tailored cream-colored pantsuit, her hair perfectly coiffed, and her signature diamond earrings resting against her neck. To anyone else, she looked like the epitome of a polished, affluent Atlanta socialite. But I could see the rigid tension in her jaw and the cold, calculating emptiness in her eyes. She did not rush over to hug me. She did not pretend to be the tearful, heartbroken mother she had played for our extended family just hours ago. The audience of country club peers and church leaders was gone. We were entirely alone, and Vivienne immediately dropped her carefully constructed facade. She walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows and sharply yanked the privacy blinds shut, blocking out the view of the city. She turned around and marched toward my desk, pulling out a leather guest chair and sitting down with aristocratic authority. "You are making a terrible mess." Maya, my mother, began, her tone completely flat and transactional. "I spent my entire morning putting out your fires. I had to call half the city to ensure the narrative stayed exactly where I put it. You always were incredibly stubborn, but this little rebellion of yours ends right now today." I placed the physical drive back into my bag and folded my hands on the desk. "You broke into my secure office, Mom," I said, keeping my voice dangerously level. "You orchestrated a massive digital smear campaign to destroy my public relations firm. You convinced the entire family I am suffering from a psychotic break. And you are sitting in my chair telling me that I am the one making a mess." Vivian scoffed, waving her manicured hand dismissively in the air. "Do not play the victim with me, Maya. It does not suit you. You are a smart girl. You know exactly how the world works. I know everything that happened last night. I know you broke into the Midtown condo. I know you found Jamal and Chloe together. I know about the missing car and the money. Jamal called us the second you left the penthouse. He was terrified, but your father and I handled it." I stared at her, feeling a sickening wave of revulsion wash over my body. "You know your youngest daughter is sleeping with my husband," I stated, pronouncing every word with deliberate precision. "You know they stole $200,000 from my bank account to cover Dad's illegal embezzlement. And you are sitting here defending them." "They did what they had to do," Vivian replied, her voice devoid of a single ounce of maternal warmth or remorse. "Your father was facing absolute financial ruin, Maya. He made a few bad investments with your grandmother's portfolio. If Beatrice found out about the missing funds, she would ruin him. She would cut us out of the will completely. We needed that cash immediately to cover the margin call before the Monday audit. You have a successful business. You have plenty of money. You could afford to lose it. Your father could not afford to go to prison." I let out a harsh, humorless laugh. "So you authorized my husband to rob me blind. You used my car to secure a loan from an underground criminal." "And Chloe," I asked, leaning forward slightly, "how exactly does your golden child sleeping with my husband factor into your twisted strategy to save the family?" Vivian did not even flinch. "Chloe is young and impulsive," she said, brushing off the horrific betrayal as if it were a minor social faux pas. "She and Jamal have a connection. Jamal was feeling neglected by you. You work entirely too much, Maya. You are always traveling, always tied to your phone. Jamal needed attention, and Chloe provided it. Honestly, they make a beautiful couple. They fit together perfectly in our social circles. You were always too rigid for him anyway." The sheer depravity of her justification was staggering. My own mother was validating my husband's infidelity with my sister because it served her ultimate goal of controlling the family dynamic. She viewed my marriage as a disposable asset and my bank account as her personal emergency fund. "I am not here to argue about morals with you," Maya Vivian continued, crossing her legs and leaning forward. "I am here to give you your instructions. You are going to call your lawyer this afternoon. You are going to file for a quiet, no-fault divorce. You will not mention Chloe. You will not mention the stolen money. You will cite irreconcilable differences, and you will let the marriage end peacefully." I watched her speak, treating my life like a failed corporate merger she was trying to liquidate. And the $200,000, I asked, testing the absolute limits of her audacity. You are going to leave the $200,000 with Richard? Vivian demanded, her eyes locking onto mine with ruthless intent. Consider it repayment. We raised you, Maya. We put clothes on your back and fed you. We gave you the prestigious last name that allowed you to open this fancy little PR agency in the first place. You owe your father that money. You will walk away quietly. You will let Chloe have Jamal. You will let us keep the car and the cash, and you will accept the narrative that you are taking time off for mental health reasons. I remained perfectly still, letting her ridiculous demands hang in the cool air of my office. You truly believe I am going to sign away my marriage, my life savings, and my reputation just to protect Dad's criminal enterprise? I asked. Vivian slammed her hand against my glass, her composure finally cracking into pure aggressive malice. You will do exactly as I say, Maya, because you have absolutely no other choice. If you dare go to your grandmother, or if you go to the police, your father goes to federal prison. Our entire family legacy will be destroyed. Chloe's life will be completely ruined before it even begins. Do you really want to be the daughter who destroys her own family? I do not care about Dad's freedom, I replied coldly. I do not care about Chloe's ruined life. They made their choices. They committed the crimes. Vivian's face twisted into an ugly, menacing scowl. If you do not comply with my demands, I will make sure you are destroyed, she threatened, her voice dropping to a vicious whisper. I have spent decades building my network in this city. I sit on the board of every major charity. I know every country club president, every sorority alumni director, and every corporate executive in Atlanta. I initiated the smear campaign this morning just to show you a fraction of my power. If you fight me, I will make sure you are blacklisted from every single social and professional circle in this state. I will call your clients personally. I will tell them you are violent and unstable. Your business will collapse. You will have no money, no husband, no family, and no future. You will be absolutely nothing. She sat back in her chair, breathing heavily, staring at me with a triumphant glare. She believed she had delivered the ultimate checkmate. She believed her social power and her ruthless blackmail had successfully broken my spirit. She waited for me to cry. She waited for me to surrender. Instead, I slowly leaned back in my ergonomic leather chair. I looked at the woman who had spent my entire life making me feel inadequate. I felt a genuine, effortless smile spread across my face. It was a cold, calculating smile that mirrored the very tactics she had just tried to use against me. You always were a brilliant storyteller, Mom, I said, my voice soft but laced with lethal confidence. But you made one massive miscalculation today. You walked into the office of a professional crisis manager, and you threatened to destroy my life without checking your surroundings first. Vivian frowned, her triumphant expression faltering slightly. What are you talking about? She snapped. I slowly raised my right hand and pointed a single manicured finger toward the corner of my desk. Sitting discreetly beside my dual monitors, hidden perfectly among a cluster of decorative plants and office supplies, was a sleek black cube. On the front of the cube, a tiny red light blinked with a steady rhythmic pulse. I am talking about security protocols, Mom, I explained, watching her eyes track the direction of my finger. I handle confidential corporate secrets for a living. I routinely deal with hostile negotiations. I do not just have cameras in the lobby. My private office is equipped with a hidden 4K resolution security camera equipped with a highly sensitive built-in microphone. The color instantly drained from Vivian's face, leaving her skin a pale ashen gray. Her mouth parted in silent horror as her eyes locked onto the blinking red light. It is connected directly to my secure cloud server. I continued, my smile widening as her panic finally set in. It has been recording since the exact second you shoved your way through my door. It recorded you admitting that Dad embezzled millions from Grandma Beatrice. It recorded you admitting that Jamal and Chloe stole my $200,000 to cover his margin call. It recorded you confirming the affair between my husband and my sister. And most importantly, Mom, it just recorded you committing textbook criminal extortion and blackmail against me. Vivian started to shake. Her perfectly maintained posture collapsed as she gripped the armrests of the guest chair. You cannot use that, she stammered, her voice trembling with sudden, unadulterated fear. It is illegal to record someone without their permission. Actually, Mom, We are currently standing in a commercial business space, not a private residence. I corrected her, tapping my desk lightly. And my reception area clearly displays a sign stating, "The premises are under audio and video surveillance for security purposes." This recording is entirely legal and completely admissible in a court of law. You did not just confess to corporate fraud. You handed me the exact weapon I need to send you and Dad to federal prison together. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the glass surface, and looked directly into her terrified eyes. You wanted me to play the role of the quiet, obedient victim, but you just gave me the match to burn your entire fake empire to the absolute ground. You have exactly 10 seconds to get out of my office before I send this footage directly to Grandma Beatrice's attorney. Vivienne did not say another word. She grabbed her purse and ran out the door. I watched her flee, knowing the real war had just truly begun. The heavy glass door clicked shut behind my mother, leaving a profound and terrifying silence in my office. I did not waste a single second celebrating her panicked retreat. I immediately pulled the physical storage drive containing her entire extortion attempt from my secure local server and dropped it into my leather bag. I walked out to the reception area where Sarah was anxiously hovering near her desk. I gave her a set of rapid-fire instructions. I told her to cancel every meeting on my calendar for the next 48 hours. I ordered her to forward all media inquiries to the legal department with a strict no-comment policy. I instructed her to tell my priority clients I was handling an aggressive corporate espionage issue and I was going completely off the grid to neutralize it. I walked out of the building and bypassed my rental car entirely. I ordered a private black car service, instructing the driver to take me directly to the financial district. I needed to move like a ghost. My family thought they could bury me in scandal and force my surrender. They assumed I would simply crumble under the immense weight of their social manipulation and blackmail. Instead, I was treating them exactly like a hostile corporate takeover. I was officially severing my emotional ties and approaching my blood relatives as aggressive adversaries who needed to be permanently dismantled. I arrived at the towering glass and steel skyscraper that housed Attorney Sterling's law firm. He was a ruthless veteran of the Atlanta legal system, a man who commanded absolute respect and feared absolutely no one. He managed my grandmother Beatrice's massive real estate empire with surgical precision. I bypassed the standard reception area and used a private elevator reserved exclusively for high-net-worth clients. Sterling was waiting for me in his sprawling corner office overlooking the city. "You said it was an emergency," Maya Sterling noted, gesturing for me to sit in one of the heavy leather chairs facing his desk. He leaned forward, folding his hands together. "Your grandmother briefed me on the fraudulent car title transfer last night. She is expecting a full explanation from your father by sunrise. But Richard has gone entirely silent. He has not answered a single call from our office today." "Richard is not going to call you," I replied, reaching into my bag. "He is currently scrambling to cover up a multi-million-dollar financial crime, and he is using my stolen life savings to do it." I placed two separate encrypted drives on his immaculate mahogany desk. I did not offer a lengthy emotional preamble or shed a single tear. I simply laid out the unvarnished facts. I told Sterling about the hacked safe in my home office. I explained how Jamal bypassed my dual authentication security protocols to wire $200,000 out of my personal savings account. I detailed my midnight raid on the secret Midtown penthouse and catching my husband in bed with my sister Chloe. Sterling remained perfectly stoic, but his eyes sharpened with intense analytical focus. I slid the first drive across his desk. "This contains the audio recording from the penthouse last night," I explained. "You will hear Chloe directly admit that Jamal stole my money to cover a massive margin call for my father's failing investment fund. She also confesses that my father used my stolen Audi as physical collateral for an underground loan shark to secure bridge cash." Sterling plugged the drive into his secured terminal and played the audio file. The clear, arrogant voice of my sister filled the quiet office. We listened as Chloe mocked me, laughed about the stolen money, and detailed Richard's desperate embezzlement scheme. Sterling did not flinch, but his jaw tightened significantly. When the audio ended, I slid the second drive forward. "This morning, my mother orchestrated a massive digital smear campaign to label me mentally unstable." I continued. She then illegally bypassed my office security to deliver an ultimatum. She demanded I file a quiet divorce, surrender my stolen money, and walk away from my company. She threatened to ruin my professional reputation if I went to the police. This drive contains the hidden video footage of her committing textbook criminal extortion and blackmail. Sterling played the video. He watched Vivian pace around my office, threatening to blacklist me from every corporate contract and social circle in Atlanta if I exposed Richard's financial crimes. He watched her openly admit to the affair, the theft, and the embezzlement. Sterling paused the video and sat back in his heavy leather chair. He removed his glasses and let out a slow, measured breath. "Your family has handed us a fully loaded weapon," he stated, his voice vibrating with lethal professionalism. "They have provided absolute recorded confessions to grand larceny, wire fraud, extortion, and corporate embezzlement. But we need the physical paper trail to ensure Richard cannot shift the blame onto your husband. We need to prove the exact path of the stolen funds." Sterling immediately mobilized his elite team of forensic accountants. Because Richard had committed a felony involving Beatrice and her assets, Sterling had full legal authority to subpoena the shadow accounts associated with my father's investment fund. We spent the next 6 hours locked inside a secure conference room, tracking every single digital footprint. The financial dig was absolutely devastating. Sterling's team bypassed the standard family trust protocols and cracked open Richard's hidden ledgers. The evidence painted a horrifying picture of unchecked greed. Richard had been quietly siphoning millions of dollars from Grandma Beatrice's commercial real estate holding companies for over 14 months. He had masked the missing funds by falsifying quarterly return reports and shifting debt between dummy corporations. We found the exact paper trail linking my stolen savings to his failing enterprise. The $200,000 had been wired from my account to a shell company registered under Jamal's name. From there, it was immediately routed into Richard's margin account to prevent a catastrophic default before the upcoming Monday audit. They had stolen my money to plug a hole in a sinking ship. "We have everything we need," Sterling announced, placing a thick stack of printed financial records onto the conference table. "The chain of custody is undeniable. Richard is guilty of massive corporate fraud. Jamal is guilty of grand larceny and unauthorized digital access. Vivian is guilty of extortion. They are facing decades in federal prison." The heavy oak doors of the conference room suddenly opened. Grandma Beatrice walked in, her silver-handled cane tapping rhythmically against the hardwood floor. She wore a tailored charcoal suit, her posture radiating absolute authority. She had been briefed on the situation, but she needed to see the evidence with her own eyes. Beatrice took a seat at the head of the table. Sterling handed her a secure tablet containing the audio from the penthouse and the video from my office. The room was completely silent as my grandmother watched her own daughter and her grandchildren plot to destroy me to cover up massive theft. She listened to Chloe laugh about my stolen money. She watched Vivian coldly threaten to ruin my entire life. When the final video ended, Beatrice placed the tablet face down on the table. She sat perfectly still for a very long moment. I watched a single tear escape her eye and roll slowly down her weathered cheek. It was a tear of profound grief for a family she had built with her own two hands, a family that had become thoroughly corrupted by greed and status. She raised a steady hand and wiped the tear away. When she looked up, her eyes were devoid of any lingering sadness. They had hardened into pure, impenetrable ice. She had mourned the loss of her family. Now she was ready to deliver their punishment. "My daughter sold her soul for country club memberships," Beatrice said, her voice echoing with chilling finality. "My son-in-law stole from my legacy to fund his pathetic ego. My granddaughter gleefully destroyed her sister's marriage for sport. They believe they are untouchable because they hide behind my last name. They believe they can discard you, Maya, and suffer absolutely zero consequences." Beatrice leaned forward, resting both hands on her silver cane. "They are gravely mistaken. We are not going to handle this quietly behind closed doors. We are not going to let them sweep their crimes under a rug and pretend they are respectable members of society. They wanted to destroy your public image, Maya. We are going to completely obliterate theirs." Sterling leaned forward, mirroring her intensity. We have enough evidence to have them arrested today, Beatrice. I can call the Financial Crimes Unit right now. No, Beatrice commanded sharply. Arresting them quietly in their homes is far too generous. They thrive on public attention. They care only about their social standing and their elite reputation. Therefore, we will execute their downfall on the largest stage possible. Beatrice turned her piercing gaze toward me. The annual Black Excellence Charity Gala is happening this Saturday at the Four Seasons Hotel. Every major politician, corporate executive, and socialite in Atlanta will be sitting in that ballroom. Richard fully expects me to call him onto the stage and publicly announce him as the sole heir and chief executive of my entire empire. Vivian has already bought a custom gown for the occasion. Chloe and your treacherous husband are planning to attend as the new power couple of our family. A fierce, unrelenting fire ignited in my chest. I understood exactly what my grandmother was proposing. We were going to let them walk into a room filled with the most powerful people in the state. We were going to let them bask in the spotlight they craved so desperately. And then we were going to pull the floor out from under them. Sterling, pull the financial records, Beatrice instructed, her tone shifting into pure tactical execution. Prepare the unredacted bank statements, the forged car title, and the digital transaction logs. Maya, you will prepare the audio and video files. I am personally changing the gala program. When the time comes for the keynote presentation, we are not going to show a slideshow honoring our family history. We are going to broadcast their absolute destruction across a 40-foot projection screen. I nodded, feeling a deep, powerful sense of alignment with my grandmother. My parents had spent my entire life casting me aside. They had labeled me the difficult daughter, the rigid workaholic, the ungrateful scapegoat. They had convinced the city of Atlanta that I was losing my mind to protect their criminal enterprise. They wanted a public spectacle. We were going to give them one they would never forget. Sterling began drafting the necessary documents to freeze Richard's remaining assets and coordinate with the local authorities. He would personally ensure the police were waiting in the wings when the trap was finally sprung. We spent the remainder of the evening meticulously crafting our master plan. Every detail was scrutinized. Every potential counterattack was anticipated and neutralized. I was no longer a victim hiding from my abusers. I was an active participant in their absolute ruin. I walked out of Sterling's office building late that night, the cool Atlanta air rushing past me. I looked up at the glittering city skyline. My family thought they had successfully buried me. They had no idea I was a seed ready to tear the concrete apart. The gala was only 3 days away. I was ready for war. The grand ballroom of the Four Seasons Hotel in Midtown Atlanta was a spectacular display of wealth, power, and influence. It was the night of the annual Black Excellence Charity Gala, an event my grandmother Beatrice had founded 2 decades ago. The room was transformed into a glittering paradise of cascading orchids, crystal centerpieces, and gold-accented table settings. Hundreds of the most influential political figures, corporate giants, and elite socialites gathered under the massive chandeliers. Tonight was supposed to be the crowning moment for my family. The rumor circulating through the velvet-roped lobby was that Beatrice was finally stepping down from her throne. My father, Richard, was already working the room with the arrogance of a man who believed he had just conquered the world. He wore a custom-tailored velvet tuxedo, holding a glass of expensive bourbon in one hand, while slapping the backs of city council members with the other. I watched him from the mezzanine balcony before making my official descent. Richard was absolutely glowing. He was completely convinced that my grandmother was going to call him onto the grand stage tonight and publicly hand him the keys to her multi-million-dollar real estate empire. He believed he had successfully covered up his massive embezzlement. He thought his underground loan shark was satisfied with my stolen Audi as collateral. He thought his financial crimes were perfectly buried. They were playing the roles of the perfect young power couple, completely unbothered by the fact that they had destroyed my marriage and stolen my life savings to buy their tickets to this event. Trailing right behind them was Jamal's older sister, Keisha. She held her smartphone high in the air, actively live streaming their entrance to her massive audience of gossip blog followers. Keisha was loudly narrating the scene, ensuring every single person watching at home knew that her brother and Chloe were the future of our prestigious family line. Keisha pointed the camera at Chloe, hyping up her dress and calling her the untouchable princess of the Atlanta elite. They were deliberately using this highly publicized charity gala to cement their fake narrative. They wanted the world to see them as flawless royalty, while pushing the lie that I was locked away somewhere suffering from a severe manic breakdown. I took a slow, deep breath, smoothing my hands down the sides of my gown. I did not wear my usual corporate black or gray. Tonight I wore a striking floor-length crimson-red dress that demanded absolute attention. I adjusted my posture, lifting my chin high, and walked down the grand marble staircase toward the main ballroom floor. I did not hide. I did not shrink. I moved through the crowd with the poised, lethal grace of a woman who held the executioner's axe. Conversations naturally paused as I glided past the round banquet tables. I caught the confused stares of several country club women who had received my mother's frantic emails about my supposed psychotic break. They whispered behind their hands, clearly shocked to see me looking breathtaking, completely composed and utterly unbothered. I offered them polite nods and brief smiles, refusing to give them a single ounce of erratic behavior to scrutinize. My mother Vivian spotted me from across the room. She was standing next to an ice sculpture wearing a heavily beaded sapphire gown. The moment her eyes locked onto mine, a smug, triumphant smile spread across her face. I watched her lean over to my father and whisper directly into his ear. Even from a distance, I knew exactly what she was saying. She was telling Richard that her ruthless blackmail had worked. She believed that my arrival in a beautiful dress meant I had surrendered. Vivian thought I was here to play the role of the quiet, obedient daughter. She thought I had accepted my place at the bottom of the family hierarchy. She thought I was going to let Chloe keep my husband and let Richard keep my stolen money, just to protect her precious social standing. I held my mother's gaze from across the room and offered her a soft, knowing smile. Let her feel victorious for a few more minutes. Let her enjoy the dizzying height of her fake social pedestal before the gravity of reality pulled her straight down to the concrete. I navigated gracefully through the sea of expensive suits and designer dresses, making my way toward the front of the room. I did not approach my parents' table. I walked directly toward the exclusive VIP section, reserved for the foundation board members. Attorney Sterling was already seated there, checking his luxury watch with a calm, methodical precision. He caught my eye and gave a single microscopic nod. The forensic financial files were locked and loaded. The local authorities were standing by in the hotel security office. The trap was perfectly set, and the bait was happily swimming right into the center of it. The clinking of crystal glasses and the low hum of sophisticated jazz music filled the expansive space. I took my seat at a table adjacent to the main stage, keeping my back straight and my hands folded neatly in my lap. Chloe and Jamal eventually noticed me sitting there. I saw the brief flash of panic cross Jamal's face. He instinctively took a half step away from Chloe, his corporate survival instincts battling against his arrogance. He remembered the pepper spray. He remembered the cold tone of my voice when I cornered him in the penthouse. But Chloe simply glared at me and flipped her long hair over her shoulder. She linked her arm back through Jamal's, pulling him closer to her side. She was so blinded by her own narcissism that she truly believed she was untouchable. She believed Vivian's blackmail had completely neutralized me as a threat. Keisha noticed me too. She immediately pointed her phone camera in my direction, trying to capture a moment of weakness. She wanted me to look angry or devastated so she could feed the narrative to her followers. I simply turned my head, looked directly into her camera lens, and raised my glass of sparkling water in a silent toast. Keisha lowered her phone, looking unnerved by my absolute lack of reaction. The psychological warfare they had tried to wage against me was completely failing, and they were slowly beginning to realize that I was not following their script. The grand ballroom lights began to dim, signaling the start of the evening program. The jazz band played a final crescendo before stepping back into the shadows. A vibrant spotlight illuminated the center of the massive stage. The chatter of hundreds of powerful guests slowly faded into an expectant hush. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for all night. My grandmother Beatrice stepped out from behind the heavy velvet curtains. The entire room erupted into a standing ovation before she even reached the microphone. She was a living legend in this city, a pioneer who had broken through massive racial and economic barriers to build her empire. She walked slowly, but with immense purpose, her silver-handled cane striking the stage floor with a rhythmic, commanding sound. She wore a tailored black gown with a high collar radiating an aura of absolute supreme authority. Richard was standing near the front of the stage, clapping louder than anyone else. He buttoned his suit jacket and shifted his weight clearly, preparing to be called up to the podium. He had a prepared acceptance speech folded in his inner breast pocket. He was ready to accept the applause, the power, and the ultimate control of the family trust. Vivian stood right behind him, wiping a fake tear of joy from her eye. They were standing at the absolute pinnacle of their delusions. Beatrice reached the center of the stage and adjusted the microphone stand. The applause naturally died down, leaving the massive ballroom dead silent. The anticipation in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Beatrice looked out over the sea of faces. Her piercing gaze swept past the mayor, past the city councilmen, and past the wealthy investors. She looked directly at Richard, and then her eyes shifted to meet mine. "Thank you all for gathering here tonight," Beatrice began, her voice booming through the state-of-the-art sound system. Her tone was not warm or celebratory. It was heavy and serious, carrying the weight of an impending storm. For 2 decades, this gala has been a beacon of excellence, integrity, and community building. We have celebrated the very best of what our people can achieve when we operate with honor and discipline. Richard smiled proudly, nodding his head in agreement with her words. "When you build an empire," Beatrice continued, her hands resting firmly on the podium, "you must eventually think about legacy. You must think about who will carry the torch when your hands are no longer strong enough to hold it. You must ensure that the foundation you built on honesty is not handed over to those who would rot it from the inside out." A slight murmur rippled through the front rows. The tone of the keynote speech was unusually sharp. It did not sound like a joyful retirement announcement. It sounded like a stern warning. My father shifted his weight, looking slightly confused, but he maintained his eager smile. He took half a step closer to the stairs of the stage, ready to claim his prize. "I have spent the last 48 hours doing a very deep, thorough examination of my own legacy," Beatrice declared, her voice rising with fierce, undeniable power. "And I have discovered a terrifying truth. I have discovered that the very people I trusted to protect my foundation have been actively working to destroy it. I have discovered that blood does not guarantee loyalty, and a shared last name does not guarantee integrity." The entire room fell dead silent. You could hear a pin drop in the massive, cavernous space. The wealthy executives and politicians exchanged shocked, nervous glances. Keisha had stopped live streaming, her phone hanging limply at her side. Chloe and Jamal were frozen in place, the arrogant smiles completely wiped from their faces. Vivian grabbed Richard's arm, her acrylic nails digging into his tuxedo sleeve. The triumphant glow on her face had been replaced by stark, raw terror. She finally realized that her blackmail had not worked at all. "Tonight, I am not standing here to pass the torch to the next generation," Beatrice announced, her voice echoing like thunder across the silent ballroom. "Tonight, I am standing here to burn the rot out of my foundation. I am not passing the torch, I am cleaning house." The silence that followed my grandmother's declaration was so absolute, it felt like the oxygen had been violently sucked out of the room. My father Richard stood completely frozen at the base of the grand stage stairs. The eager, arrogant smile he had been wearing all evening melted into an expression of sheer, unadulterated panic. He looked frantically back at my mother Vivian, who was suddenly gripping the edge of their banquet table so hard her knuckles were stark white just to keep her balance. "Richard, step back," Beatrice commanded, her voice stripping him of whatever dignity he had left. You have absolutely no place on this stage tonight. You have no place in my legacy." My father opened his mouth to protest, but the words died instantly in his throat. He slowly stepped away from the stairs, his face flushing a deep mottled red. The elite guests whispered feverishly among themselves. Instead, Beatrice continued, extending her hand toward my table. "I am calling upon the only person in this family who actually understands the meaning of integrity. Maya, please join me on the stage. I stood up smoothly. I did not look at my parents or my cheating husband. I kept my eyes fixed on my grandmother as I ascended the marble steps. My crimson gown trailed behind me like liquid fire. When I reached the podium, Beatrice handed me a small, sleek remote control. The stage was finally mine. I turned to face the crowd of Atlanta politicians, corporate executives, and high society elites. My family had spent the last 48 hours trying to convince these exact people that I was suffering from a manic breakdown. They had launched a vicious smear campaign. Now they were going to see exactly why I was the most dangerous public relations executive in the city. "Good evening," I said, my voice perfectly steady and clear, echoing through the massive ballroom. "My family has spent the last 2 days spreading vicious rumors about my mental health. They told you I was hallucinating. They told you I was erratic. They did this because they were terrified of what I was about to show you tonight." I pressed the button on the remote. The lights dimmed slightly as the massive 40-foot projection screen behind me hummed to life. Instead of a touching montage of happy family photos, the screen was filled with high-resolution banking documents. Loud gasps rippled through the front rows as the guests leaned in to read the glowing numbers. "What you are looking at is a certified wire transfer," I explained, pointing a laser at the highlighted section of the document. 2 days ago, while I was away on business, $200,000 was stolen directly from my personal savings account. The money was wired to a shell company registered to my husband, Jamal Davis. From there, it was immediately routed into the margin account of my father's investment fund. I paused, letting the magnitude of the theft sink into the minds of the wealthy investors sitting in the audience. Many of them had money tied up in Richard's failing fund. I watched their faces turn from confusion to outright horror as they realized their own investments might be compromised. "My father, Richard, has been running a failing enterprise," I declared loudly, ensuring every single word reached the back of the room. "To cover his massive stock losses, he has been quietly embezzling millions of dollars from my grandmother, Beatrice's commercial real estate portfolio." When Beatrice ordered a surprise audit this week, my father needed cash immediately to hide his ongoing theft. He convinced my husband to rob me blind to cover his fraudulent tracks. I looked down at Jamal. He was sitting completely paralyzed at his table. The arrogant swagger he had walked in with was entirely gone. He looked like a cornered animal, realizing there was absolutely no way out of this trap. But $200,000 was not quite enough to satisfy my father's urgent debts. I continued pressing the button on the remote for the second time. The giant screen transitioned to a side-by-side display. On the left was the transfer document for my Audi RS7. On the right was a certified fraud alert document issued directly by the Department of Motor Vehicles. My father needed a bridge loan from an underground lender to survive until the wire transfer cleared international banking hurdles, I told the shocked ballroom. To secure that illegal loan, he needed high-value physical collateral, so he stole my luxury vehicle. He and my husband forged my digital signature to transfer the title to my younger sister, Chloe. They did this to make the disappearance of my car look like a generous family gift, rather than the desperate act of a criminal trying to appease a loan shark. I looked directly at Chloe. She was trembling, visibly clutching the edge of her table. The sorority sisters sitting at the adjacent tables were staring at her with wide, disgusted eyes. The untouchable princess of the Atlanta elite society was being exposed as a willing accessory to grand larceny. Vivienne jumped up from her chair, her face twisted in pure desperation. "Turn that screen off!" she shrieked, her voice cracking with hysteria. "She is lying. Maya is sick. Do not look at those fake documents." I did not even blink. I pressed the button on the remote for the third and final time. "I am not sick, Mom," I said, my voice cutting through her frantic screaming like a blade. "And I am not lying. But you do not have to take my word for it. Let us hear the confession straight from the golden child herself." The screen went black, but the state-of-the-art sound system crackled to life. The crisp, undeniable audio recording from my midnight raid on the Midtown penthouse began to play. Chloe's arrogant voice echoed through the massive ballroom loud and clear. "Oh, relax, Jamal," she scoffed through the powerful speakers. "Maya is not going to do anything with that video. She is a coward. She will protect the family reputation because that is what she was trained to do." The guests gasped collectively. Keisha Jamal's sister dropped her face into her hands, entirely mortified by the reality of her brother's actions. Her gossip blog followers were probably watching this unfold through other people's live streams. The audio continued with Chloe proudly explaining the entire criminal conspiracy. Dad's investment fund got hit with a massive margin call, her recorded voice bragged to the horrified audience. He has been moving money out of Grandma Beatrice's real estate portfolio for months to cover his terrible stock bets. Dad needed liquid cash immediately. He told Jamal to give him your Audi. The loan shark is holding the car right now. Dad forged the title transfer to me so he could claim it was a family gift. I let the recording play until the absolute worst part. The part that destroyed any remaining shred of sympathy anyone in that room might have had for my sister or my husband. You were never the priority, Chloe's voice sneered from the speakers, dripping with venom and jealousy. You were just the bankroll. You were the strict sister who existed solely to fund the lifestyle the rest of us actually deserve. Jamal prefers me because I am fun. I am the kind of woman a successful man actually wants on his arm, not some stressed-out workaholic. The recording ended, leaving a thick, suffocating silence in its wake. The sheer brutality of Chloe's recorded words had paralyzed the entire room. I looked down at the crowd from the stage. My sister was sobbing uncontrollably, her face buried in her hands. The young power couple facade had been incinerated in less than 3 minutes. Jamal was staring at the floor, his career, his marriage, and his freedom completely annihilated by his own greed. My mother Vivian had collapsed back into her chair, holding her chest as if she could not breathe. Her precious social standing, her country club reputation, and her entire identity had just been publicly executed in front of the very people she worshipped. And then there was my father. Richard looked up at me from the base of the stage. The panic in his eyes had morphed into something entirely different. It was pure, unadulterated, primal rage. I had just destroyed his life on the very stage where he thought he was going to be crowned a king. He had lost millions, he had lost his firm, and he was about to lose his freedom. The polished investment manager persona vanished entirely, leaving behind a desperate, violent man who had absolutely nothing left to lose. "You ungrateful witch!" Richard screamed, his voice tearing through his throat with terrifying force. He snapped completely. He charged up the marble steps of the stage, lunging violently toward me. His hands were outstretched into claws, his face contorted into a mask of pure violence. I was fully intending to physically attack me right there in front of hundreds of high-profile witnesses to stop me from saying another word. I stood my ground, refusing to step back. But before he could take 3 steps onto the platform, before my grandmother even had to raise her cane to defend me, a deafening crash echoed from the back of the room. The heavy wooden double doors of the grand ballroom burst open, slamming against the expensive wallpaper with a violent, resounding boom that shook the floorboards beneath our feet. The dramatic entrance immediately drew every single terrified eye away from my raging father and toward the back of the enormous room. The cool air from the hotel lobby rushed inside, swirling around the crystal centerpieces and flickering candles. We had planned for every possible variable tonight, anticipating the exact moment Richard would realize his complete defeat. I thought he could silence me with brute force, relying on the old fear he used to instill in me when I was just a powerless child. But I was not a child anymore, and I was definitely no longer fighting this battle alone. The trap had officially sprung shut, and the absolute final consequence of their boundless greed had finally arrived to collect its dues. 12 detectives from the Atlanta Police Department, Financial Crimes Unit, flooded through the main entrance of the grand ballroom. They did not wear tuxedos or evening gowns. They wore dark tactical windbreakers with solid gold badges gleaming brightly under the massive crystal chandeliers. Their heavy black boots marched in perfect unison against the polished marble floor, cutting through the shocked silence of the elite crowd with a terrifying military precision. Attorney Sterling stood up slowly from his chair at the exclusive VIP table and gave a single firm nod to the lead detective. The raid was officially underway, and there was absolutely no escape route left for anyone. Richard froze halfway up the marble stage steps. His outstretched hands dropped heavily to his sides as he turned his body to face the incoming squad of officers. The violent, explosive rage that had possessed him just seconds ago instantly evaporated into the thin, cool air. It was entirely replaced by the stark, undeniable terror of a broken man who realized his entire fake existence was permanently over. Richard Davis, you are under arrest for massive corporate embezzlement, wire fraud, and grand larceny. The lead detective announced, his voice booming effortlessly through the completely silent room. My father desperately tried to back away, but there was literally nowhere for him to go. Two heavily built detectives flanked his sides, immediately cutting off any potential path of retreat. Richard let out a pathetic, high-pitched whimpering sound that echoed horribly across the elegant tables. He raised his shaking hands in a weak defensive gesture, but the aggressive officers did not hesitate for a single second. One detective violently grabbed Richard's custom-tailored velvet tuxedo jacket and forcefully spun his body around. Richard was thrown face first against a tall glass cocktail table situated near the grand staircase. The expensive crystal floral centerpieces completely shattered onto the hardwood floor as the detective aggressively yanked my father's arms behind his stiff back. The sharp, piercing metallic click of steel handcuffs snapping shut echoed loudly across the massive room, sealing his absolute fate. The billionaire real estate moguls and prominent city politicians sitting in the front rows actively recoiled from the disturbing scene, rapidly pulling their wives away from the violent spectacle. The wealthy men who had been shaking my father's hand and drinking his expensive bourbon just 20 minutes ago were now staring at him with pure, unadulterated revulsion. He was being brutally, publicly humiliated and caged in front of the very only audience he had ever truly cared about impressing. Jamal did not wait for the busy detectives to call out his name over the crowd. From my high vantage point on the stage, I watched my cowardly, pathetic husband abandon my younger sister Chloe without a second thought. Jamal cowardly ducked his head down low and bolted rapidly toward the dim service exit located near the hotel catering kitchen. He shoved forcefully past a group of terrified catering waiters, knocking a massive silver tray of champagne flutes high into the air. The glasses shattered everywhere, but Attorney Sterling had anticipated the specific layout of the Four Seasons ballroom perfectly. Three large detectives were already strategically stationed at the back wooden doors, waiting quietly in the shadows. Jamal slammed directly into the broad, solid chest of a massive plainclothes police officer. The heavy physical impact sent them both crashing backward into a towering tiered dessert station. Jamal scrambled frantically on the slippery marble floor, his expensive designer suit now completely covered in crushed chocolate cake and sticky vanilla frosting. "Please let me go," Jamal sobbed desperately, raising his shaking hands to physically shield his crying face from the officers. "I can easily give back the stolen money. I will gladly give it all back to her tomorrow. Please do not completely ruin my professional career over this mistake. I am a respected financial analyst in this city." "You are a convicted felon," the arresting officer sharply corrected him, dragging Jamal forcefully up from the floor by his ruined white collar. "Jamal Davis, you are under arrest for grand larceny, unauthorized digital access, and severe corporate forgery. You have the absolute right to remain completely silent. I highly suggest you actually use it before you confess to anything else tonight." They aggressively slammed Jamal against the heavy wooden service door and cuffed his wrists tightly behind his back. He wept openly, his broad shoulders shaking uncontrollably as the brutal reality of a lengthy federal prison sentence crushed his pathetic, desperate dreams of ascending the Atlanta corporate ladder forever. He had stupidly traded his faithful marriage for a stolen luxury car and a fake empty promise, and now he was leaving the charity gala locked in the back of a dirty police cruiser. Back at their lavish banquet table, Chloe was screaming hysterically. She was hyperventilating wildly, her trembling hands pulling aggressively at her long hair as she watched Jamal get violently dragged away by the authorities. Her perfectly manicured, flawless facade was completely, irrevocably shattered into a million tiny, jagged pieces. She looked frantically around the enormous room, seeking anyone willing to step forward and defend her honor. She looked directly toward her sorority sisters, the girls who had loudly praised her stolen Audi just 1 hour ago, instead of offering warm comfort. The powerful regional president of her elite sorority stepped out from the whispering crowd. She was a formidable, intimidating woman in her early 50s who commanded immense, unwavering respect in Atlanta high society. She marched directly over to the round table where Chloe was weeping pathetically into her hands. The president did not look remotely sympathetic or caring. She looked thoroughly, completely disgusted by the display. Chloe Davis, the president, stated, her voice carrying absolute chilling authority across the nearby tables. You have deeply disgraced the sacred letters of our prestigious sisterhood. You have publicly admitted to committing financial fraud and shamefully sleeping with your own older sister's married husband. You are a complete, utter embarrassment to everything our noble organization stands for and represents. Chloe gasped loudly, shaking her head frantically from side to side in pure denial. No, please do not do this to me, Chloe begged, reaching out to desperately grab the older president's clothed arm. It was just a huge mistake. My parents told me to do it to save our family. The president forcefully slapped Chloe's reaching hand away, as if it were infected with a terrible disease. Remove your precious pearls, the president demanded coldly, without a single ounce of mercy. Remove your golden pin right now. You are officially permanently stripped of your active membership, effective immediately, as of this exact moment. You are permanently excommunicated from our entire national alumni network. If you ever dare to claim association with us again, we will legally file a strict restraining order against you. Chloe let out a devastating, gut-wrenching wail, struggling wildly to unclasp the pearl necklace from her sweaty neck. Her entire fake social identity, her only true source of personal validation, was being brutally, completely stripped away in front of the entire glittering city. She dropped the pearls heavily onto the glass table and buried her weeping face in her bare arms, sobbing loudly and inconsolably into the silk tablecloth. Only a few feet away, Keisha was actively experiencing her own total social destruction. Jamal's older sister had been excitedly live-streaming the entire gala, attempting to proudly showcase her family's untouchable royalty to the internet. When the projection screen surprisingly lit up with the stolen bank statements, she had completely forgotten to stop the live video broadcast. Thousands of her dedicated gossip blog followers had watched the undeniable visual evidence of her brother's horrific financial crimes. They had heard Chloe's crystal clear, recorded confession echoing through their phone speakers. They were currently watching the armed police officers drag Jamal aggressively out in silver handcuffs. Keisha's bright phone screen was lighting up rapidly with thousands of incoming angry comments. Her once loyal followers were viciously immediately turning against her in the digital space. The nasty woman who had successfully built a lucrative career on destroying other innocent people's reputations was now the primary target of a massive, relentless digital mob. Corporate brands were rapidly dropping their lucrative sponsorships in real time as the horrific scandal unfolded live. Famous influencers were publicly actively blocking her social media profiles. Keisha frantically tapped her glowing screen, trying desperately to delete the disastrous livestream, and quickly shut down her accounts. But the widespread damage was entirely irreversible. The internet never ever forgets, and Keisha was officially permanently ruined in the Atlanta social scene. Amidst the terrifying chaos of the police arrests and the brutal public excommunications, my mother Vivian stood entirely alone. The arrogant woman who had violently barged into my private office and explicitly threatened to blacklist me from every single country club was now completely, totally isolated. Her powerful husband was sitting in tight handcuffs. Her precious golden child was publicly deeply disgraced. Her stolen hidden wealth was officially entirely frozen. Vivienne looked frantically around the massive ballroom, desperately searching for a single friendly, forgiving face in the massive crowd. The local politicians swiftly turned their stiff backs to her. The wealthy socialites immediately averted their carefully made-up eyes. The prominent charity board members whispered harsh, cutting judgments behind their manicured hands. She had absolutely no social leverage left to use. She had absolutely no societal power. She had absolutely no fake, glamorous narrative to hide safely behind anymore. Vivienne slowly, nervously turned her full attention back to the elevated stage. She looked up pitifully at Grandma Beatrice, who was standing incredibly tall and completely unbothered, leaning gracefully on her ornate silver cane. Vivian suddenly clearly realized there was only one single person left in the entire world who possessed the massive power to save her from absolute total destitution. My mother stumbled pathetically toward the stage, her heavy beaded sapphire gown dragging messily across the littered floor. She did not walk with her usual fake aristocratic pride or her typical arrogant swagger. She scrambled awkwardly up the slick marble steps, her weak knees buckling significantly as she finally reached the wide-top platform. She collapsed heavily onto the hard floor right at Beatrice's expensive leather shoes. "Mother, please, I beg you!" Vivian sobbed, her voice cracking with raw, desperate, genuine terror. She violently grabbed the delicate hem of Beatrice's black dress, weeping openly and uncontrollably, like a frightened child. "Please forcefully stop this nightmare. Richard simply made a foolish mistake, but he is still a part of this family. You absolutely cannot send him to a federal prison over this. We will immediately lose the big house. We will permanently lose absolutely everything we have built. I will literally have nothing left in this world. Please just show us a little mercy tonight." Beatrice did not step away from her weeping daughter. She looked deeply down at Vivian with an intense expression of profound, completely immovable judgment. She did not offer a single hand to help Vivian stand up. She did not raise her commanding voice to match the hysteria. She spoke with a quiet, devastating, absolute clarity that pierced straight through my mother's dark, greedy soul. "I gave you every single possible advantage in this difficult world," Vivian Beatrice stated firmly, her tone significantly colder than dark winter ice. "I gave you immense wealth, superior education, and undeniable elite status. And what exactly did you do with all of it? You deliberately used it to foster ugly, relentless greed. You intentionally used it to nurture disgusting, unchecked arrogance. You raised a spoiled, ungrateful thief, and you actively participated in the violent robbery of your own flesh and true blood." Vivian sobbed even louder, aggressively pressing her wet face against the cold stage floor. "I am so terribly sorry, Mother. I am so deeply, endlessly sorry for what we did. I promise I will completely fix it. I will actively make Richard return every single stolen cent of the missing money. Just please tell the angry police officers to let him go home right now." "You absolutely cannot fix this massive destruction," Beatrice replied, shaking her silver head very slowly. "You viciously broke into Maya's secure office and desperately tried to destroy her honest business, just to protect a common criminal. You happily watched your cowardly husband steal my entire hard-earned legacy, and you happily smiled while he actively did it. You genuinely thought you were so incredibly clever, actively manipulating everyone around you just to maintain your precious elite social standing. But simply look around you right now, Vivian. Look very closely at the important people you tried so incredibly hard to desperately impress." Vivian weakly lifted her shaking head, looking out pitifully at the large, empty ballroom. The remaining elite guests were silently watching her pathetically grovel on the stage floor, their wealthy faces filled with absolute pity and intense disgust. "You willingly sold your dark soul for temporary fake status," Beatrice declared, delivering the final absolute lethal blow, "and you actively sold your eldest talented daughter for a cheap counterfeit life. You currently have absolutely nothing left." Beatrice definitively turned her back on the weeping Vivian, signaling that the conversation was permanently officially over forever. She walked slowly over to me and placed a warm, gentle, reassuring hand heavily on my right shoulder. We stood quietly together on the wide stage, looking out silently over the total smoking wreckage of my toxic former family. The aggressive police officers roughly marched Richard out the main front doors, his sweaty head bowed in absolute total irredeemable shame. The grand ballroom slowly eventually began to entirely clear out as the last shocked guests quietly exited the building, leaving my mother loudly weeping on the stage floor and my sister softly sobbing at a completely empty table. I felt absolutely no lingering guilt whatsoever in my heart. I felt absolutely no deep sorrow for the horrible fate that had rightfully befallen them tonight. I felt only the wonderfully clean, incredibly sharp, crisp air of total, undeniable, permanent liberation. The deeply toxic, suffocating infection had been completely, entirely, surgically removed from my entire life. The dark, terrible era of forced silence was completely over now. I had fought a brutal war against my own blood, and I had finally unequivocally won. The wheels of justice moved with a swift and ruthless efficiency that left my former family absolutely no room to breathe. The chaotic months following the explosive charity gala were a rapid, relentless blur of severe federal indictments and brutal, highly public court hearings. Richard desperately tried to leverage his remaining social connections to negotiate a lenient plea deal, but Attorney Sterling ensured the prosecution had an airtight, undeniable case. My disgraced father was formally sentenced to 10 long years in a maximum security federal penitentiary for massive corporate embezzlement and severe international wire fraud. His custom-tailored velvet suits were permanently replaced by standard-issue prison uniforms, marking the absolute end of his pathetic, arrogant facade. Meanwhile, Jamal faced his own absolute spectacular financial ruin. Because of his direct, undeniable involvement in the digital forgery and grand larceny, the National Financial Regulatory Boards permanently revoked every single one of his professional trading licenses, ensuring he could never trade again. He was completely blacklisted from the global corporate banking world and rapidly became a massive toxic liability to any reputable investment firm. Forced into immediate, total, and devastating bankruptcy, Jamal cowardly fled the state of Georgia entirely, hoping to quickly escape the massive, unrelenting public humiliation that violently followed him everywhere he went. The very last pathetic update I heard was that my incredibly treacherous former husband was working a grueling minimum wage retail job at a completely depressing strip mall in Central Florida, completely stripped of the lavish wealth and the fake high status he had desperately tried to steal from me. My mother Vivian and my sister Chloe faced a completely different kind of harsh, unforgiving prison, with Richard's assets entirely frozen and aggressively seized by the federal government. To pay back the stolen millions, they were promptly evicted from their sprawling, luxurious Buckhead mansion. The elite, wealthy women of Atlanta completely excommunicated them from every single exclusive country club, charity board, and prestigious high society social organization. Chloe suddenly could not secure a single entry-level law firm internship because her ruined reputation was completely radioactive in the professional legal community. Absolutely stripped of their stolen wealth and fake glamorous glamour, they were forced to urgently move into a tiny, rundown, roach-infested apartment on the extreme distant outskirts of the city. They were left with absolutely nothing but each other and the incredibly bitter, agonizing memory of the mighty, beautiful empire they so greedily destroyed. My own personal, glorious rebirth was built directly on the hot, smoking ashes of their total destruction. I aggressively filed for divorce the very next morning after the explosive gala, and my elite legal team executed a completely brutal, entirely one-sided settlement. Jamal had absolutely no liquid money left to fight me in court, and I easily recovered every single stolen cent of the $200,000 he previously stole from my private safe plus substantial heavy punitive interest. I legally reclaimed full and complete ownership of my thriving business and officially severed every single remaining tie to his permanently ruined name. I was finally completely free. Grandma Beatrice kept her strict, unwavering promise to clean house and permanently secure her legacy. A few short weeks after the overwhelming dust finally settled, she called me into Attorney Sterling's office for a highly confidential private meeting. She looked at me with immense, genuine pride and officially signed over the majority-controlling shares of her entire real estate and beauty empire. I was no longer just the proud owner of a highly successful public relations agency. I was the newly appointed chief executive officer of a massive multi-million-dollar family legacy. I boldly merged my expert crisis management skills with her vast financial resources, successfully creating a massive new venture capital fund dedicated strictly to supporting fierce, independent Black female entrepreneurs across the greater Atlanta area. I wanted to ensure that other hardworking, dedicated women had the strong, essential financial backing they needed, so they would never ever have to rely on toxic, highly manipulative family members to survive and thrive. It is a crisp, vibrant Tuesday afternoon, and I am confidently stepping out of the towering glass doors of my stunning new high-rise corporate headquarters in downtown Atlanta. I am wearing a sharp, flawlessly tailored crimson suit the exact color of absolute undeniable victory. The busy, loud city bustles around me, vibrant and full of endless, bright, glowing opportunities. I hand my ticket to the waiting valet. He smiles respectfully and quickly jogs off to retrieve my vehicle. A minute later, a familiar, powerful engine purrs smoothly approaching the curved concrete curb. The valet pulls up my perfectly detailed Audi RS7, legally reclaimed, completely untouched and gleaming flawlessly under the bright, warm, beautiful southern sun. I hand the helpful valet a generous cash tip and slide gracefully into the plush black leather driver's seat. The clean interior smells like expensive leather and total absolute freedom. I adjust my firm grip on the steering wheel, feeling the powerful engine hum deeply beneath my resting hands. I look up, tilting the rearview mirror slightly to catch my own gaze. I look directly into my own reflection, clearly seeing a fierce, unstoppable woman who went through absolute hell and emerged completely unbreakable. They tell you that blood is thicker than water, but sometimes blood is just toxic and you have to bleed it out to survive. Have you ever had to legally and socially destroy the people who share your last name to protect your peace? Tell me your story in the comments. And remember, never leave your receipts in a safe someone else has the code to. I boldly shift the sleek luxury car into drive, press my right foot firmly down on the gas pedal, and rev the powerful engine. I speed off into the beautiful, bright Atlanta skyline, feeling completely ready to finally face and completely conquer whatever amazing, incredible new challenge eagerly comes my way next.